Chapter 53. How could they deal with an NPC that was too smart? As mentioned before, most players would just kill the NPC so that they could keep dealing with the stupid NPCs. Gunyan did the same. He wouldn't mind killing Gunyan if he had the chance, but the latter had proven that killing her wasn't easy. Even though she was still a chaotic prime and had just entered the transcendent level, the law of reflection was so strange that it could be used in all kinds of wonderful ways. The law itself was enough for her to fight against regular nuance level players. However, it was a pity that Gunyan was a veteran who had been through hundreds of battles. The enemies he had faced in the past were much stronger than Gunyanji. Just as Gunyanji breathed a sigh of relief, a pitch-black figure slowly emerged from her shadow, then suddenly sprang out and stabbed her in the heart with a sword. The dark shadow sword pierced through the girl's heart and took away her life. Gunyan stared at Gunyan in shock, as if she couldn't believe that he would really kill her. Then she slowly collapsed. "Stop pretending," said Gunyan calmly. "Every force is reciprocal, and so is life and death. An attack that doesn't find the point of reflection can't kill you." Gunyan's voice echoed in the air. Gunyan's body on the ground gradually dissipated, and a brand new Gunyan slowly walked over. "You seem to know me very well." Gunyan's eyes were filled with curiosity. Gunyan didn't deny it. "I just know this world very well." He had seen the characteristics of the law of reflection in his previous life. As for resurrection, it wasn't something impressive in the game. Gunyan wasn't completely helpless, but the appearance of this power made him really interested in Gunyan. He could leave some difficult tasks to her. Gunyan pulled back his hand and looked at the dead Shermiauer. A strange smile appeared on his face, and he said, "Now, let's talk about the terms. What conditions?" Gunyan secretly heaved a sigh of relief, but he spoke indifferently. The power of shadow was indeed extraordinary. It was more strange and unpredictable than any power she had seen before. If Gunyan was still unwilling to stop, the result would be unpredictable. Her immortality was not limitless. "I want to completely take over the martial arts meet." Gunyan's face didn't have the slightest smile. If Gunyan didn't agree to this condition, he would immediately turn hostile. Players were a group of very realistic people. Gunyan didn't care about being used or not. Wasn't helping NPCs complete quests in the game the same as being used? However, if any NPC dared to interfere with his quest, he would definitely hack them to death. Therefore, he could be the vanguard for care for one's family on the condition that he took over the martial arts meet. Gunyan was a little scared by his stare. He could only bite the bullet and agree. "Okay, what are you going to do?" Destroying the Long family was of course the most important thing, but the martial arts meet was also the main task of care for one's family. They couldn't let Gunyan do whatever he wanted. Gunyan didn't know what was going on. He shook his head and said, "You will know when the time comes." When Gunyan returned to care for one's family, the sisters of Lu's family were still waiting for him. Land Marigold still pretended not to know him. Lu Sinyu's gaze was a little strange. Bai Luoluo opened her big eyes and looked innocent. "Although I don't know what method you used, to cure her." Lu Sinyu's face was a little dark. "But I hope you could try to use a more sunny method. For example, I hope that when I ask her what her dream is, she won't tell me that she wants to be a killer queen." Lu Sinyu was expressionless. "Oh, isn't that good?" Gunyan said after thinking for a while. Land Marigold quickly said, "Sister, I think we should stay for a little longer and help her sort out." It had to be said that Land Marigold's words touched her heart. Lu Sinyu nodded immediately. After the two left, it was not until midnight that Land Marigold sneaked into Gunyan's room again. "Tell me the details of the mission." Naturally, Gunyan didn't sleep. When Land Marigold came, he said, "By the way, I don't have much time. How does the time flow?" Land Marigold introduced the mission as quickly as she could. In fact, it wasn't complicated. It sounded like an ordinary bodyguard mission. Different from the tower defense mission like guarding White Dew, this mission was more like the Blue Sky City mission that Gunyan had seen before. It was to protect a target NPC. The more troublesome thing was that this mission wasn't something that Gunyan had encountered in his previous life. But immediately after, Land Marigold told Gunyan an unexpected problem. The time flow is 10 times faster, but the mission starts tomorrow night. Land Marigold said calmly. The world rules of a relatively large plane couldn't be reset. Therefore, the plane coordinates would only appear at the time of the mission. Goonan calculated in his mind. If he entered tomorrow, he wouldn't have enough time. The martial arts tournament is a? That's not right. I have the final say in the martial arts tournament. Early the next morning, Goonan had a good sleep. Care for One's family was still busy. The encirclement of the Long family yesterday wasn't very successful. After all, the Long family had 4 transcendents. Apart from 6th Uncle Long, who had died at the hands of Goonan, there were 3 more. Unfortunately, all 3 had escaped last night. Before the 3 of them were captured or killed, Care for One's family wouldn't dare to kill the Long family's forces. Otherwise, the 3 of them would drop everything and become assassins without any qualms. They would assassinate the higher-ups of Care for One's family one by one. At the end of the day, it was Goonan's decisiveness that caused trouble. No one had expected that not only had Goonan killed Long Quan, but he had also killed 6th Uncle Long. The death of a transcendent had caused a great feud that wouldn't end until one of them was dead. This forced Care for One's family to act in advance. It was also because they hadn't prepared well that the 3 transcendents had all escaped. What? You want to delay the start of the martial arts tournament? Gu Xingzhu looked at Gu Nan in front of her. She felt like her scalp was about to explode. At a time when there were so many things to worry about, he actually came to stir up trouble. Seriously, how long do you want to delay it? Gu Nian asked calmly. At least 3 days. We'll talk about the exact time when I come back. Goonan didn't hold back at all and directly spoke in a commanding tone. The veins on Gu Xingzhu's forehead bulged, and even her breathing quickened. Did this person know what the martial arts tournament meant to Care for One's family? All the martial artists in the Red Carp were looking forward to this annual event, but you actually... Okay, big sister. Gu Xingzhu felt like the world was going crazy. Goonan nodded in satisfaction and left. Gu Xingzhu, however, couldn't help but stop Gun Yen. Big sister, why are you accompanying him in his madness? Gun Yen smiled silently. Unless he wants to ruin the event, we'll listen to him for the rest of the martial arts tournament. Why? Gu Xingzhu wasn't convinced at all. They had worked so hard to prepare the tournament, and it was handed over to Gun Yen just like that. Gun Yen looked at her seriously. I can guarantee you that if you don't listen to him, this martial arts tournament will definitely not go on. Gun Yen was right. Although it was only a verbal agreement, Gun Yen was fearless. If he came back and found that the martial arts tournament had already begun, he would definitely start a massacre on the spot. Although Care for One's family earned the most from the Long family incident, Goonan didn't actually gain nothing. He at least proved to everyone that he, Goonan, was a nuanced realm powerhouse and one of the top martial artists on this planet. In other words, he now had the right to talk to any force. He was already a real big shot. And now, this big shot came to a low bungalow and lurked in the dark, silently watching a girl practicing martial arts. Student Lin Yunyan didn't notice this at all. She woke up early as usual, practiced in the morning, endured the pain day after day, and honed her inner breath. Chapter 54. You know what? I'm very rich. Goonan said in a persuasive tone. Come with me. I can give you an endless supply of pills. Perhaps it was because of the thrill just now. Lin Yunyan seemed very calm. I don't need it. Oh, why? So many people died. We can't hide it from the police. Lin Yunyan seemed to be disheartened. It won't be long before they find me. Dad and sister will know. Goonan looked at her blankly. To be honest, he had thought of many answers in his mind, but he never thought it would be this one. Police? At least 100 people had died in the siege of the Long family yesterday. Even he himself had been killed in the Long family meeting house, but he hadn't seen the police come out. It could only be said that he had been standing too high from the beginning. In fact, for the civilians, the government was still the most authoritative institution. Regarding this, Goonan didn't know how to explain to Lin Yunyan. You may not know who I am. He threw the plastic bag aside. But I'm not afraid of the police. If you're willing to follow me, I guarantee that no one will dare to investigate you. Lin Yunyan raised her head and looked at him. her gaze clearly filled with distrust. Gunan shook his head helplessly and suddenly punched the wall next to him. The wall, which was already full of scars, suddenly collapsed, revealing a shocked family behind the wall. It was a middle-aged couple and a 7- or 8-year-old boy, a very normal family of 3. "Who are you?" the man asked with a sullen face. No one would be in a good mood when their wall was smashed. Gunan gently waved his hand, and 3 pitch-black arrows shot out, directly piercing the 3 people's eyebrows. "Did you see that?" Gunan helped Lin Yinyin up, not minding her embarrassment at all. Killing people is not a big deal. As long as you are strong enough, no one will dare to cause you trouble. Then the police, if there is, kill them. Lin Yinyin lowered her head and looked at her bloodstained hands, saying nothing. There's no turning back. Gunan concluded with this sentence. Thus, this young girl who had only lived for 13 years, but had lived through 13 years of purgatory on Earth, knew that she was indeed forced into a desperate situation. "What do I need to pay?" "I need your talent. When you become a transcendent, serve me for 3 years, and then I'll set you free." Gunan sat alone in the room. In the end, he did not bring Lin Yinyin back. Instead, he let her continue to cultivate as if nothing had happened. As for the corpses of the hooligans and the family, someone would naturally take care of them. "Young Master Nan, the results are out." Wang Dong's voice sounding more respectful than before. Gunan nodded lightly. He knew that, as the fuse that led to the destruction of the Long family, his battle last night would definitely be widely publicized, and the fact that he was in a nuanced realm could not be hidden from the observant people. Let Gunan become a target, and not let people think that care for one's family deliberately planned this. This was Gunyin's plan. Gunan did not mind this. As long as he could complete his task, he did not care how many people were hostile to him or how many plotted against him. Now, what Gunan received was the detailed results of the powder Lin Yinyin had swallowed. It was no different from what he had guessed. Ashpine powder was a very common addictive drug. Using the word poison was already an exaggeration. Without considering the side effects, how many drugs are more effective than this? Gunan turned to Wang Dong and asked. 4, one of which is a specialty of 66 Amaterasu, using cypress snowgrass as the raw material. It's not addictive. Wang Dong had obviously done his homework and answered without hesitation. I don't want it if it's not addictive. Gunan waved his hand. Wang Dong was a little shocked, but he still said quickly, there's also a drug called pink powder. It's very high purity, and the effect is very strong, but the side effects are also very strong. It was originally used for astral beasts to induce love. It's good that it's effective, but the side effects... Oh, it's an aphrodisiac. Nan replied casually, and only realized halfway through his sentence. It's better to give her some ash pine powder normally. Keep the pink powder for now. Letting Lin Yinyin take drugs was one thing, and she could find a place where no one was around to get high. If she switched to an aphrodisiac, it would be hard to hide it. Besides, what happened to Shermiao made him a little suspicious, but he still needed to verify it further. Lin Yinyin was a good way to test him. A smile appeared at the corner of Gunan's mouth, and Gunyin's calm and indifferent face appeared in his mind. Yes. Wang Dong bowed and answered. After Wang Dong left, Gunan stayed in care for one's family and didn't go out again. He was waiting for the night to come, and then he and Land Marigold would be reincarnated to complete a mission. As for the serial incident, he felt that he had done enough preparation work. The martial arts tournament could basically be controlled in his hands, and the more obvious key figures had also been controlled. He just had to wait for the event to start. At night, Gunan came to a deserted mountain range, and Land Marigold was already waiting for him there. Of course, they wouldn't be reincarnating in care for one's family, so they had to choose a place where no one would notice. As a reincarnator, Land Marigold appeared particularly capable and indifferent. When she saw Gunan coming, she immediately said, "Let's go, the astral array is ready." Gunan nodded. He first opened the astral gate and asked Land Marigold to share the mission with him, so that he could get the plane coordinates. The plane coordinates were a very special existence that couldn't be described with words or words. They could only be used during reincarnation. "Why are you still 0? Land Marigold saw Gunnan's astral gate and couldn't help but wonder. After the last mission, you should be at least 1 star. Oh, I forgot to receive the reward. Gunnan replied casually. Land Marigold's face couldn't help but turn black. She worked herself to death and caused the death of 2 of her teammates, but this guy didn't even care about the reward. Gunnan really didn't care about the reward of the astral gate. After all, his goal was the sin value, not some broken star. After getting the coordinates of the mission plane, Gunnan didn't pay much attention to it and directly said, "Let's go, it's almost time." It was still the familiar scene of reincarnation. The body was placed in the endless void, and the soul was constantly guided until a fixed position before it slowly landed. Then it was divided into 2. One half merged with the origin of the world, and the other half became the symbol of the soul. It's actually the reincarnation of a demigod's soul. Unable to communicate with the soul state, Gunnan could only mutter in his heart. His consciousness slowly sank, and when he woke up again, he and Land Marigold were lying on a grassland, and there were battle cries everywhere. This seemed to be a battle of pursuit, and Gunnan was on the fleeing side. "There's some trouble." Land Marigold also woke up and frowned slightly. "The karma of my body is to kill one of the leaders of the pursuers. Then kill." Gunnan didn't care at all and said casually. At the same time, he began to check the memory of his body. Although he didn't care about karma, he still needed to understand this world. However, when he read the memory, he was completely stunned. This world, at this moment, a loud laughter came from afar. Chapter 55. On the boundless grassland, countless cavalrymen arrived in an instant. They wore the same uniform armor and called themselves the Green Dragon Army. A cavalryman whizzed past Gunnan and was casually smashed into minced meat by him. The commotion was so loud that Land Marigold was shocked. She looked at Gunnan's slightly gloomy face and asked in confusion, "What's wrong? Is your karma very troublesome?" Gunnan shook his head. The original body's memory was still slowly emerging, telling him about the changes in this world over the past 20 years and their current situation. This was actually the immortal demon world 20 years later. The world was in chaos 20 years ago, but now it had become a battle between the Southern Shun and Northern Jin Kingdom. The battle between good and evil 20 years ago was now a battle between the disciples of the 4 sects against the Blue Dragon Hall. Too many things had happened in the past 20 years, and many changes made Gunnan unable to react at once. But what he couldn't figure out was, why did the immortal demon world suddenly appear 20 years later? Even if the flow of time had changed, it couldn't have crossed such a large distance, and the plane coordinates were also different from before. Could this be a similar twin plane? That couldn't be right. The Blue Dragon Hall was built by Gunnan himself. While Gunnan was still puzzled, he heard a voice beside him. "Why are you 2 in a daze? Hurry up and cover the young lady's retreat." A middle-aged man with a protruding mouth and ape-like cheeks scolded the 2 of them. Gunnan slowly gathered his thoughts and turned to look at Land Marigold, saying, "Are you here to protect the young lady?" "That's right." Gunnan nodded and looked at the middle-aged man again, saying, "Lead the way." "What did you say?" The middle-aged man was instantly shocked and angry. "You 2 are guards. How can you even protect the young lady?" Slap. Gunnan slapped him across the face, causing his head to spin 180 degrees and his body to fall heavily onto the ground. "It seems that he doesn't know. Let's find it ourselves," Gunnan said indifferently, as if he had done something trivial. Land Marigold was a little stunned. This was the first time she had gone on such a mission with Gunnan. The previous tower defense missions had not given Gunnan any room to perform. No wonder he doesn't care about working with me. Is this his true colors? Land Marigold looked at Gunnan's side profile and felt an indescribable feeling in her heart. The 2 of them began to wander around the chaotic army. Fortunately, the Blue Dragon Hall cavalry had a clear target. As long as they could determine where they were going, it would not be difficult to find them. Main mission: protect Zhang Yueying for 30 days. There was only one main storyline quest in the Evil God's Temple, and there was nothing else. Clearly, this was not a side quest, so there was not much to discover. As they ran, the 2 of them soon reached the edge of the battlefield. For a pursuit battle, this was the core of the battle. Miss, hold on a little longer. The reinforcements from the 4 gates will be here soon. An old man with white hair and beard was fighting bravely. He was covered in blood, but his words were full of vigor. The miss he was talking about was a girl in plain clothes. She held a thin sword in her hand, but she could repeatedly stab the gaps in the cavalry's armor, showing her extremely high level of swordsmanship. To Gunan, this swordsmanship looked a little familiar. Zhang Yueying, you traitor of the Blue Dragon Hall. You might as well give up and die. Someone from the Blue Dragon Hall shouted. The sword in Zhang Yueying's hand did not tremble at all. She replied calmly. The Blue Dragon Hall does all kinds of evil and brings disaster to the country. Everyone has the right to punish them. Ha ha ha. You still want to be a chastity after being a whore. A powerful voice traveled over. The Azure Dragon Army's cavalrymen slowly opened up a path, revealing a man in blue armor. The old man's expression changed slightly. Miss, it's the commander of the 6th Army, Huamingda. He reached the peak of the innate stage 2 years ago and is one of the top experts in the world. Old man Bai, you don't have to say anything. Your miss knows better than you. Huamingda sneered. Do you know that she was one of the 5 saintesses in the Blue Dragon Hall? Crack. Before Huamingda could finish his words, a strange sound came from the battlefield, and his words stopped abruptly. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, the head of this ever-victorious general slid down slowly. Everyone quieted down, and only then did they realize that there was a figure standing behind him. That person was dressed in white and had black hair. He looked indifferent, as if killing Huamingda was like killing a fly. This was naturally Gunan. After killing Huamingda, he kicked his head away, and it fell right next to Lan Marigold. This person was her karma target. The soldiers of the Blue Dragon Hall finally reacted, and all of them roared in anger. He killed the commander. Go! Kill him to avenge the commander. Kill! The corners of Gunan's mouth revealed a trace of a cold smile as the shadow beneath his feet suddenly expanded and enveloped his surroundings within it, and then numerous sharp blades actually appeared out of thin air within the shadow. Countless soldiers felt pain in their feet, and their bodies were pierced by the shadow blades, and they were all dead. With just this move, more than 100 soldiers of the Blue Dragon Hall died in the hands of Gunan. The dead were sliced cleanly, and only pieces of flesh were left. None of them had a complete body. A large space was cleared around Gunan, and no one dared to move forward. It's a Grandmaster. Run. It's a Grandmaster. The Blue Dragon Hall might be an army, but they were also martial artists, and they had a clear understanding of extraordinary Grandmasters. They were not people that ordinary people could fight against. Innate stage experts might be killed by the army, but once they entered the extraordinary stage, they would be able to control the power of heaven and earth and activate their supernatural powers. They would not be afraid of the human wave attack. Therefore, the Blue Dragon Hall cavalry left as quickly as they came, and within a few minutes, they were all gone. The white-haired old man and Zhang Yueying were still in a daze. There was no such Grandmaster in the 4 gates. Could it be a newly advanced extraordinary? In any case, the white-haired old man hurriedly came forward and thanked him. Thank you for saving us, sir. May I ask which of the 4 gates you are from? Lan Marigold walked forward and said, We are not from the 4 gates, but, hey! Before she could finish her sentence, Gunan had already punched the white-haired old man's face, and his facial features were completely deformed, and a large part of his face caved in. Zhang Yueying's expression changed. However, the next moment, she blacked out, and she did not know anything. When Zhang Yueying woke up again, she was lying flat in the carriage, and the man and woman who took her away were sitting next to her, talking. She did not dare to open her eyes immediately, and decided to eavesdrop on their conversation. We were supposed to protect her. Why are you so violent? The woman's voice was obviously complaining. The man's next words made Zhang Yueying very anxious. It's just to protect her from death. Isn't it simple to take her away and hide in the deep forest? Chapter 56. Plane transition was a phenomenon unique to small and medium-sized planes. When a plane's source changed, it was easy for the plane to jump levels and its nature would change. This process was known as transition. During transition, the entire plane would be in a special high-speed state, and the flow of time would be much faster than the outside world. This was the reason why 20 years could pass in the blink of an eye. The tragedy of Ming Lu was that once their reincarnators left, they would lose the coordinates of this plane and would never be able to enter again. The people inside could not receive any news and could only watch as their companions left, but no one else entered. There was no time limit for reincarnation, but there was a limit to the soul itself. No one's soul could last 20 years of reincarnation. In other words, we are the only two reincarnators left here. Gu Nin understood the meaning of transition, and he also understood why Ming Lu had suffered such a tragedy. The result was really a pleasant surprise. Not necessarily. Land Marigold dampened his enthusiasm. This is equivalent to a new plane, and there are many missions here. It's normal to bump into other reincarnators. Gunan nodded lightly. No wonder they came here by accident. The probability was higher. 2 days later, Gunan's group arrived at the border between the north and the south, Azure Dragon City. A pugilistic force can actually build a city. As expected, the country is weak. Land Marigold looked at the majestic city in front of her, shook her head, and laughed. She was also a veteran reincarnator, and it was not like she had never seen a world with a feudal background. Zhang Yueying immediately glared and said, when the old hall master was around, Blue Dragon Hall was a first-rate force in the world. The Chun Emperor even wanted to confer her the title of prince, but the old hall master rejected it. An organization built entirely on one person's prestige is destined to not last long. This result is proof. Land Marigold said calmly. Enough. Gunan waved his hand. There's nothing to argue about. Bring us to Blue Dragon Hall. Zhang Yueying glared at Land Marigold and could only lead the way. As for Land Marigold, after she turned her head, the disdain in her eyes suddenly disappeared. Instead, she revealed a look of deep thought. She whispered to Gunan, "There's something wrong with that woman." Gunan smiled but didn't say anything. He only needed someone to lead the way. He didn't care about anything else. Azure Dragon City, Blue Dragon Hall headquarters. A dignified man dressed in a purple gold robe was sitting on the main seat, looking around calmly. Shuahaoran, you traitor. Shuahaoran, you colluded with the Jin Nation and sold your country for your own glory. You are pushing the Blue Dragon Hall to eternal damnation. Shuahaoran, the accusations echoed in the meeting hall, but Shuahaoran didn't say a word and responded to everyone with silence. Only when everyone was tired of cursing and stopped did he slowly open his mouth. I didn't call you here to discuss what to do next. Shuahaoran glanced at them calmly and said, I'm here to inform you that the Jin army will enter the city this afternoon. What did you say? Shuahaoran, are you crazy? Everyone was in an uproar. Shuahaoran finally forced a smile on his face, but his eyes were full of coldness. If you have the time to curse me, you might as well think about how to survive. His words caused the scene to quiet down. The Jin army was about to enter the city. They might be surrounded by the army now, and it would be too late to retreat. Moreover, everyone's family was in the Azure Dragon City. How many of them would be willing to abandon everything and leave? For the sake of the country, of course, everyone would say it when they were safe. But once their lives were at stake, how could they expect everyone to be a saint? Shuahaoran understood this, and so did the other 3 Vice Hall Masters, so they started to hesitate. Shuahaoran smiled even more. He didn't give them any time to react and struck while the iron was hot. He said, Han Yuchan, you said I sold my country for my own glory. Which country are you selling? Han Yuchan, the only female among the Vice Hall Masters, said coldly, Of course it's the South Chun. The South Chun. Shuahaoran sneered. Han Yuchan looked back. How many people here are from the South, and how many are from the North? This question was powerful and resonant. Not only did Han Yuchan's expression change, even the other 2 Vice Hall Masters' expressions changed. Everyone present became even quieter. The rise of the Blue Dragon Hall was in the north. Those who could stand in this hall were all senior members of the hall. Naturally, most of them were from the north. Strictly speaking, They all belonged to the current Jin state. However, the old Hall Master supported the Chun state and rebelled against the Jin state, so no one thought about this. Now, Shuehaoran brought it up. In this way, many people didn't even have the moral problem of switching sides. More importantly, once this was said, the Blue Dragon Hall would no longer be united as before. The three Vice Hall Masters felt a chill in their hearts. They all felt a deep sense of helplessness. Shuehaoran looked at the changing expressions on everyone's faces. He knew that his plan had succeeded, and he was just waiting for him to raise his arm. As long as the Hall Master doesn't return, the Jin army won't be able to enter the Azure Dragon City safely. A gentle but dignified voice came from outside the door. A beautiful figure slowly walked into the hall. Miss Lin. Miss Lin. As soon as that person appeared, someone hurried to welcome her. Obviously, she had a very high status in the Blue Dragon Hall. Han Yuchan was one of them. She looked at Lin Jun with joy. Miss Lin, you came at the right time. Let's work together to restrain Shuehaoran first. Then, we can discuss how to resist the Jin army. Shuehaoran was the most powerful among the four Vice Hall Masters. Even if the three of them worked together, they could only defeat him at most. It would be very difficult to make him stay. If Miss Lin made a move, it would be completely different. Those who followed the old Hall Master to conquer the world knew that Miss Lin's strength was unfathomable. Even the old Hall Master said that he might not be able to deal with Miss Lin. If there were other hidden transcendent martial masters in the world other than those three, Miss Lin could very well be one of them. Shuehaoran watched Lin Jun walk closer step by step. He didn't look too panicked. Miss Lin, you should know who can save the Blue Dragon Hall. Lin Jun was as calm and indifferent as before. I only know who brought a great enemy to the Azure Dragon City. Seeing this, Shuehaoran couldn't help but sigh. He was about to continue speaking when he heard a voice. Since Miss Lin insists on being the enemy of the state of Jin, why do you still try to persuade her? Vice Hall Master Shue. The three Vice Hall Masters' expressions changed when they heard the voice. Even Lin Jun's brows furrowed. There were so many people present, but none of them noticed the person's arrival. They couldn't even tell where he was even after he spoke. A transcendent grandmaster was here. Could it be the state preceptor of the state of Jin, Qi Lingshuan? This name popped up in Han Youchan's mind immediately. The other two Vice Hall Masters did the same. Everyone's hearts turned cold. Then, they saw Shuehaoran smiling faintly and stepping aside. A figure was standing there quietly. It's a woman, not Qi Lingshuan. The three heaved a sigh of relief before they quickly reacted. That's not right. Even if it's not Qi Lingshuan, it must be a transcendent grandmaster with divine martial arts. The woman's gaze swept across everyone and finally landed on Lin Jun, Fairy Lin of the Fairy Sect. Lin Jun raised her head in surprise. There weren't many people in the world who could recognize her background. Which family did this woman belong to? As if reading Lin Jun's mind, the woman sneered. Fairy Lin doesn't know me. Even Yin Xiao Xiao probably doesn't remember a nobody like me. Chapter 57. Inside the Blue Dragon Hall, someone finally recognized Zhang Yao after she declared her vengeance. You're the holy maiden of Yinhua Tree Gate, someone exclaimed. Han Youchan's mind shook, and the scene from back then seemed to appear before her eyes again. She had been one of the members in the expedition against Yinhua Tree Gate. That pair of holy sons and holy maidens were just two children back then. Who would have thought that they were already extraordinary masters now? At this moment, she felt that a great disaster was about to befall her. If Shuehaoran was only an internal threat, this Zhang Yao was a true external enemy, the kind that would not rest until one side was dead. There was no room for negotiation for the blood feud of extermination. Unless the old Hall Master returned, there would be no peace today. Seeing that no one dared to speak, Shuehaoran took 2 steps forward and said with a smile, Miss Zhang is Imperial Preceptor Qi's brilliant disciple. Today, we will only kill the ringleader. Those who did not participate in the Yinhua Tree Gate incident back then, please think carefully. An extraordinary grandmaster was actually only a disciple. Was Qi Lingshuan this powerful? The crowd's hearts darkened, and some people began to move. Even the other 2 Vice Hall Masters could not help but have some thoughts. They had not participated in the incident back then. Lin Jun knew that the people's hearts were scattered and could only sigh softly. I'll stop them. If any of you want to leave, take this opportunity to leave. As she spoke, she formed a mysterious hand seal, and a glowing white light enveloped the entire hall. The crowd felt an indescribable pressure in their hearts, and no one could have the thought of killing anymore. Only Zhang Yao laughed softly, as expected of the secret technique of the 5 sects. Fortunately, Master was prepared. She took out a black pearl from her bosom and tossed it out lightly. The pillar floated in the air, just like that, emitting wisps of black gas. The moment Lin Jun's white light came into contact with the black gas, it was immediately pushed back as if it had met its nemesis. This is the 5 Directions Devil Pearl. Lin Jun was, after all, knowledgeable and experienced. He recognized the origin of the pearl at a glance. No wonder Qi Lungshuan was able to become a demonic transcendent in this end of days. It's because he obtained the 5 directional demon pearls. Lin Jun's expression darkened. The 5 directional demon pearls had appeared, but Yin Xiao was not around. The demonic aura of the 5 Directions Devil Pearls and her cultivation technique could be considered to be mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. It was impossible to say which one was superior to the other. However, this demonic qi was Qi Lungshuan's, and because of her cultivation technique, she had remained at the peak of the innate realm. Naturally, she was not a match for a grandmaster. The demonic energy forced the white light back bit by bit. Seeing that victory was about to come, a smile hung on Zhang Yao's face. However, at this moment, the demonic energy suddenly stopped and surged toward the door. This is... Zhang Yao was stunned, and her gaze involuntarily followed the direction of the demonic energy. She saw a young man walking over slowly, holding a black disc in his hand. The demonic aura was being drawn by the black disc. Zhang Yao suddenly remembered that Shizun often lamented that the demonic path didn't last long. She only had the demonic bead in her hand and didn't have a corresponding demonic plate. Otherwise, her demonic arts would have long been accomplished. Could this be the 9 mysterious demonic plate that had been lost? Scenes of the past surfaced in her mind. At that time, she and her brother had been chased by the people of the Blue Dragon Hall, and they had been saved by a grandmaster. That grandmaster had come for the 9 mysterious demonic plate. After that, she joined the limitless demon sect. Soon, the demon sect was destroyed, and she became a street rat. It was only when the North Jin Kingdom rose that she became a disciple of Qi Lungshuan. After that, she had investigated what had happened. In the end, the demonic plate didn't seem to have been taken away by the grandmaster. Instead, it had fallen into the hands of the person behind the Blue Dragon Hall. Wait, could it be? Zhang Yao's heart trembled, and a terrifying possibility suddenly appeared in her mind. Before she could say anything, the 5 Directions Devil Pearls shook slightly, and the demonic energy quickly gathered, forming a human figure. This person was dressed in a long gray robe. He looked middle-aged and had a refined temperament. At first glance, he looked like a middle-aged scholar. However, no one who knew him would dare to judge a book by its cover. This was because he was the state preceptor of the state of Jin, an unparalleled powerhouse with divine martial arts, Qi Lungshuan. Ha ha! I didn't expect the legend to be true. The 9 mysterious demonic plate is in the Blue Dragon Hall. As soon as Qi Lungshuan appeared, he discovered the demonic plate and immediately laughed. The hearts of the people in the Blue Dragon Hall sank. If Zhang Yao and Miss Lin could deal with it, then even Qi Lungshuan had appeared. How could they survive? They didn't notice that Lin Jun had been staring at the young man since the beginning. His expression was as if he had seen a ghost. So this demonic plate is a set. No wonder I couldn't open it back then. Gunan played with the demonic plate in his hand, his eyes filled with curiosity. In fact, when he snatched the 9 mysterious demonic plate, he wanted to release the 3 demon spirits and kill them to see if they would give him sin points. However, he tragically discovered that he didn't have a supply of demonic energy, so he couldn't even open the demonic plate. He couldn't follow Jing Nan's example and purify the demonic plate directly, so he could only put it aside. He didn't expect it to come in handy now. No, it was actually useless. The mission in the immortal demon world was over, and killing the demon spirits wouldn't give him sim points. At most, it could satisfy Gunan's collecting hobby as a player. Qi Lingshuan looked over with a smile and began to activate the 5 directions demon beads. He leisurely said, "Collect." However, the expected scene didn't appear. The demonic plate in Gunan's hand didn't move at all. In the midst of the calm, Qi Lingshuan felt a few strange gazes. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He formed a seal with his hands and pushed forward. "Go!" The demonic energy suddenly took form, and his clone condensed into a huge phantom lion that pounced straight at Gunan. "Miss Lin." A deputy hall master looked at Lin Jun anxiously. This young man was killed. So be it. He clearly had a demonic treasure in his hand. If it fell into Qi Lingshuan's hands, there's no hurry. Lin Jun shook her head firmly, her gaze still on that person. Although their appearances were different, their auras and temperaments were too similar. Furthermore, they had the demonic plate. Qi Lingshuan transformed into a demonic lion and pounced over. He was already thinking about whether he should destroy Blue Dragon Hall or go into seclusion after obtaining the demonic plate. However, Zhang Yao's shout pulled his thoughts back to reality. "Master, be careful. He's the person behind Blue Dragon Hall back then." Behind Blue Dragon Hall? Qi Lingshuan was slightly taken aback. He was also someone who had experienced the great battle between good and evil back then. His distant memories gradually surfaced. Back then, Blue Dragon Hall was born as an assassin organization, but its true reputation rose because the person behind it fought with the previous demon lord. In the end, the demon lord fled in defeat. Qi Lingshuan's heart seemed to be gripped by some kind of fear. A chill rose from his spine and rushed all the way to his head. However, it was too late for the demonic lion that he had transformed into to stop. He only saw the young man leisurely raise his hand, and the overwhelming darkness completely pressed down on him. Qi Lingshuan felt that he couldn't move at all. Moreover, the demonic energy was rapidly dissipating. He used the last of his strength to shout out a sentence before his consciousness completely dissipated. Chapter 58. In the game, there was a very obvious difference in the level of the core skills at level 3 every time they leveled up. A level 1 core skill was just an ultimate skill that was gone after it was thrown out. From level 2 onwards, the player would be given more space for micromanipulation, and the upper limit would be much higher. For example, if Gunan only had a level 1 skill, he could only use the power of shadows to directly cover the opponent, but at level 2, he could do incredible things like splitting the water flow. Therefore, it was reasonable to describe this stage as minute subtlety in this world. Gunan dived all the way. The bottom of the pool wasn't very wide, and he could even see the edge at a glance. In the deepest part, there was a faint light. Gunan followed the light and found that there was a whole other world at the bottom of the pool. From afar, there was a strange altar hidden at the bottom of the pool, and there were some strange patterns on the top of the altar. At this time, there was a black-robed figure standing on the altar. "Teacher!" A cry of surprise came from the altar. The person trapped here was indeed Yin Xiao. Although Gu Nin had changed his body, the power around him hadn't dissipated. As the person who had the most contact with Gunan back then, it was impossible for Yin Xiao not to recognize him. She quickly took off the mask on her face, ran to the bottom of the altar, and said, "Teacher, don't come in. This altar's barrier is extremely strong once you come in." "Huh?" She saw Gu Nin standing in front of the barrier, the dragon heart pendant on his chest glowing faintly. With a punch with the power of a dragon, the barrier shattered with a loud bang. Yin Xiao didn't expect that the barrier that had trapped her for almost 2 months would be like this. Sure enough, she still couldn't catch up to her teacher's footsteps. Gunan didn't think too much about it. Just like back then, he reached out and rubbed Yin Xiao's hair with a smile on his face. 20 years had passed, but her appearance hadn't changed much. She had only changed from a young girl to a woman in the workplace. She seemed to have grown slightly, and her temperament was more mature. After all, for extraordinaires, their lifespan was easily hundreds of years, and a mere 20 years was indeed nothing. After the joy of meeting Gu Nan had vanished, Yin Xiaoxiao recalled this matter, and she lowered her head as she said, "Teacher has returned this time. Has he changed his body?" "Oh, you actually guessed it?" Yin Xiaoxiao nodded lightly. After all, she was someone who had experienced the reincarnation war, and Gunan did not hide anything from her. It was not surprising that she could guess the origins of the immortal's endowed being. "We did come from another world," Gunan said. "We came here to complete some missions, and we would use different bodies every time." Hearing this, Yin Xiaoxiao's eyes lit up. "Then, can I go to Teacher's world as well?" Gunan was stunned. Indeed, he had never thought of taking Yin Xiaoxiao away. On one hand, he had no need for it. On the other hand, he did not know how to take her away. The immortal demon world wasn't like the Langya world. It was a world that hadn't been colonized and developed, so it was impossible for a place like the Ascension Center to exist. Now he could think about it. Yin Xiaoxiao had already become an extraordinaire, and he needed help with a martial arts tournament. But how could he get there? As if reading Gunan's mind, Yin Xiaoxiao pointed at the altar and said, "Teacher, look here." A moment later, Gunan returned to the pool and brought Lan Marigold down. This is a dimensional teleportation array?" Lan Marigold was dumbfounded. She stood in front of the altar and looked at the inscriptions on it. She was shocked, speechless. "If she didn't translate it wrong, it should be," Gunan said, pointing at Yin Xiaoxiao. Yin Xiaoxiao hadn't been idle during the 2 months she was trapped here. She had been studying the altar while wearing down the power of the barrier. The altar seemed to have existed for a long time. The inscriptions were an unknown language. Fortunately, the owner of the altar had left a translation method. It was a comparison between the inscriptions and the ancient language of this world. Yin Xiaoxiao had studied it for 2 months and finally managed to decipher a part of it. The most important part was the name and purpose of the altar. Lu Zhanyu frowned and said in a low voice, "Interplanar teleportation array. This is a technique that only existed in the ancient times, before reincarnation existed. There were ancient ruins in this world." It shocked her so much that she couldn't care less about Yin Xiaoxiao's presence. She even said the word reincarnation. At that time, people had just discovered the existence of planes. They used the teleportation array to travel between planes to obtain resources and sell them. Later, there were more and more ways to trade between planes. One could even directly reincarnate. This kind of teleportation array was gradually eliminated. Lan Marigold said with some emotion. It was as if she had witnessed the changes in history. Gunan didn't care about history. He only cared about whether this thing could be used. "Can it still be activated?" "Yes, it can. I just don't know how to." Lan Marigold shrugged helplessly. Who else studies this besides the people from the Ascension Centers? Gunan was also scratching his head. Yin Xiaoxiao couldn't help but interrupt. "There's also a way to activate the altar here. We just need some materials." "No." Lan Marigold interrupted her without hesitation. "I don't know what era this altar is from. The success rate of teleportation is probably less than 50%. Facing her teacher's companion, a senior from a high-level world, Yin Xiaoxiao didn't dare to refute. She could only shut up. "Can we increase the success rate if we get someone from the astral world here?" Gunan asked with a frown. "If there's a professional, then it definitely won't be a problem." Lan Marigold gave an affirmative answer. "But are you willing to expose this place? This is a plane that has yet to be developed. Just get someone from care for one's family." Gunan looked indifferent. "You believe in care for one's family so much? They can't just leave the resources here." Lan Marigold was a little confused. According to her understanding of Gunan, he wasn't such an unsophisticated person. "Who said we can let someone from care for one's family come in?" Gunan glanced at her. "I said we can get someone who knows how to set it up. After that, we'll let care for one's family kill them." Lan Marigold. The process of rescuing Yin Xiaoxiao wasn't anything special. Instead, the plane teleportation array gave Gunan a surprise. When they returned to the pool, there was a big surprise. As soon as the 3 of them appeared, A long sword stabbed toward Yin Xiaoxiao's chest. Die. The sword came so suddenly that even Yin Xiaoxiao couldn't react. After all, she had been trapped for 2 months. Her strength was in an extremely weak state. Moreover, she was by Gunan's side. It was inevitable for her to relax. More importantly, the sword came from someone she didn't expect. Chapter 59. Zhang Yueying's attack was too fast and inexplicable. Yin Xiaoxiao didn't even know she was there. She was so exhausted that she couldn't react at all. Lin Jun and Qi Lingshuan stood at the side, but they couldn't stop her in time either. They could only watch the sword stab out. Gunan stood behind Yin Xiaoxiao, expressionless. No one knew what he was thinking. Clang! The sound of metal clashing was heard. Zhang Yueying's sword was knocked away. She looked at the person next to her in a daze, the person she was least wary of. It was Lan Marigold. She couldn't have reacted spontaneously, unless Zhang Yueying stared at the woman with a peaceful smile in front of her. Unless she was on guard against me from the very beginning. Everything that had happened along the way flashed across her mind, but she couldn't remember what flaws she had exposed. It could also be said that Gunan gave her so much pressure that she completely ignored Lan Marigold. When did you notice? Ever since you purposely showed your approval of the Green Dragon Hall and not your intention to rebel, Lu Zhanyu said with a smile. That's not what you said when you were being hunted. Zhang Yueying was stunned. She finally remembered that on the battlefield, she was sworn to be enemies with Blue Dragon Hall. When she found out that Gunan and Qi Lingshuan were old friends with Blue Dragon Hall, she deliberately adjusted her own inclination. She made it seem that her rebellion was just because she didn't like the actions of the higher-ups, but because she respected the old hall master. She didn't expect that the subtle contradiction between the two would become a failure. But it was too far-fetched to suspect her just because of this. It's enough to have a little suspicion. Lan Marigold sheathed her sword unhurriedly. At the same time, she glanced at Gunan, who was still expressionless. She believed that Gunan had also noticed this. After all, she was the one who suffered from him first. Yin Xiaoxiao also recognized Zhang Yueying. She did not know what happened after she was trapped. She frowned slightly and said, Zhang Yueying, why do you want to kill me? Zhang Yueying knew that she had no chance, so she stopped pretending. She sneered and was about to speak, but Gunan suddenly spoke. Let someone else answer this question. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure had already abruptly vanished, and then immediately reappeared. He was actually carrying a figure in his hand, and it was precisely Zhang Yao who had appeared before. As time passed, Gunan's control over the power of shadow grew increasingly proficient. A junior like Zhang Yao, who had just become a transcendent, was completely helpless before him. When Qi Lingshuan saw Zhang Yao, his expression immediately changed. Traitorous disciple. You. Gunan waved his hand, signaling him to shut up. He pointed to Zhang Yueying and said, You've been waiting for this day for a long time since you arranged for her to stay in Blue Dragon Hall, right? Your sister? Or your daughter? Zhang Yao gritted her teeth so hard that they almost shattered. 20 years of planning was just about to succeed, but because of the return of the person in front of her, everything became a bubble. Do you want to know? She revealed a cold smile, and there was no sign of retreat between her brows. Even if I die, I will bring this secret to the underworld. Don't even think about knowing it for the rest of your lives. Crack! Gunan casually twisted her throat, a baffled expression on his face. If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. You make it sound like I have to know. Mother. Zhang Yueying's sorrowful cry exposed their relationship. Are they really mother and daughter? Looking at their age, they should have been born at 13 or 14 years old. Gunan rubbed his chin, completely ignoring Zhang Yueying's hateful gaze. In the next moment, the shadows began to entangle her body, like pitch-black tentacles, pouring into her eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, completely sealing off her 5 senses. What are you doing? Lan Marigold looked at him in confusion, and so did Yin Xiaoxiao. I need her to live for a while. Gunan restrained Zhang Yueying with ease and chuckled. If she realizes and commits suicide, it will be troublesome. But why are your movements so familiar? After taking care of Zhang Yao, Gunan could only wait for this mission. With his transcendent strength, this kind of mission was a waste. Fortunately, he did not care about the mission reward, only the size of the mission plane. Gunan sat alone on a hill, quietly looking at the night sky in the extreme north. A light breeze blew, and a figure was already standing behind him. "Teacher, your power is actually wind." Gunan turned around and looked Yin Xiaoxiao up and down, then shook his head. "No, it's more like a more detailed rule. Being able to elevate a skill to the level of rule at grade 3 was a characteristic of extraordinary talent, and also a privilege of NPCs. Just like Gunyin's mapping, if players had this rule at grade 3, they would at most have space folding, precise positioning, and so on. At this time, Yin Xiaoxiao was the same. She had already found her own path from the pure wind. In comparison, the players were much more miserable. Even a contestant like Gunan, who had participated in the second round, could only take it one step at a time. Of course, Gunan's understanding of the various rules and skills was not something they could compare to. As expected, "I can't hide it from teacher." Yin Xiaoxiao pursed her lips and smiled, then turned around and said, "So, teacher, did you hire people to kill my family back then?" This change of topic was too sudden, but Gunan did not stop. As if he was asked a question like, "Have you eaten tonight?" he opened his mouth and answered, "Yes, I hired Emojichi." Gunan nodded. "At that time, I did not expect that 20 years would pass in the blink of an eye. Is it because of the Ming Lu's files?" Yin Xiaoxiao's expression was solemn as she nodded slowly. It was precisely because of the appearance of the plane jump that the reincarnators left one by one. When Yin Xiaoxiao and the others began to take control of the world, the old matters gradually surfaced. However, now that things had come to this, Gunan really did not care about this matter anymore. Selling an NPC was really not a big deal to him. If Yin Xiaoxiao had second thoughts, then he could just kill her. What was the big deal? Since she had brought it up herself, it was obvious that she had other intentions. Hearing Gu Nen admitted himself, Yin Xiaoxiao only lowered her head, her body in a state of tension. After a long time, she finally let out a light breath, her face showing a look of relief. "Do you want revenge?" Gunan had a playful smile on his face. Yin Xiaoxiao shook her head lightly. "I'm not a match for teacher, nor am I a good person. I do not have the ability to take revenge, nor do I have the motivation to do so." The smile on Gunan's face gradually disappeared. "It seems that these 20 years of training have made you smarter. So, what exactly do you want?" Chapter 60. When Lin Yunyun arrived at the care for one's family, it was already late at night. The darkness of the night shrouded the earth. This young girl, who was only 13 years old, walked step by step into the deep courtyard. Her shadow stretched slowly in the moonlight, looking a bit desolate, but not actually. She came here not because of love, but because of desire. A tiger that had tasted blood would never go back to being a vegetarian again. Ms. Lin, seeing a strange girl standing in front of her and speaking in a gentle voice, she was at a loss of what to do. "Wasn't it the housekeeper who contacted me? How come she didn't want others to see her when she was taking the medicine? At least the less, the better." Lin Jun smiled and reassured Lin Yunyun with her unique charm. A moment later, she led the girl into a room and said with a smile, "The things you want are all in there." Lin Yunyun took a deep breath and didn't know what to say, but the thrill that went deep into her bones began to reverberate in her body again. "Young master," she went in. Lin Jun stood beside Gunan and said softly. Gunan nodded and stood up from the chair. In the evil god's temple in his mind, the martial arts competition had begun. On the third day after his return, Gunan started the red carp martial arts competition, and the series of events began. What he needed to do now was to earn sin points for the first event. He stood up and walked out, but Lin Jun stood in front of him with a hesitant expression. "Young master, will you kill Xiao Xiao in the future?" she asked after a long period of mental consideration. Gunan looked at her with great interest. "I thought people like you would care more about the suffering of all people than the life and death of a certain person. I'm not the fairy sex heavenly lady anymore." Lin Jun shook her head lightly. "You didn't have a choice in the past, But now you want to be a good person? Gunan teased casually, then smiled and said, "Does she think that I can't do anything to her if she stays there?" When he said this, Gunan's smile was somewhat strange. "I'm actually not that interested in you, but that's not necessarily the case for others. Care for one's family needs a manager there, and I'm in charge of the martial arts competition. Who do you think will go there?" Gunyan's room was not spacious. Compared to her status, an ordinary 1.5-meter bed was somewhat shabby. No matter what, she had to sleep on a 500-square-meter crystal bed. But even such a simple layout was unimaginably luxurious to Lin Yunyan. She realized that this was not a room prepared for her, so she moved more carefully. Her eyes slowly scanned the room, and her clenched fists began to sweat. It was as if she could hear her own heartbeat. Finally, she found what she was looking for on the dressing table. It was a bag of white powder in a plastic bag. Lin Yunyun's eyes lit up, and she instantly let down her guard. Desire occupied her mind again, and she grabbed the plastic bag and opened her mouth to chew on it. She didn't know when it started, but she liked this rough way of eating more and more. Pooh, pooh, pooh. However, as soon as it entered her mouth, Lin Yunyun couldn't help but spit it out. This was not what she wanted at all but the flour. Damn it, huh? Feeling that she had been fooled, Lin Yunyun was about to lose her temper when she found a small glass bottle hidden in the flour ball. Inside the bottle was a handful of bright red crystals, which shone faintly under the light. Lin Yunyun seemed to understand something. She quickly unscrewed the bottle cap and poured the crystal into her mouth. Unfortunately, the opening of the bottle was too narrow, and only a small amount was poured out. But as soon as this small amount entered Lin Yunyun's mouth, the girl felt like her head was about to explode. It was as if countless needles were about to pierce her cheeks and poke her into a hedgehog. The girl almost couldn't help but moan. More than 10 years of endless pain had made her develop a strange hobby. On one hand, she desperately wanted to live like a normal person and use stimulant drugs to eliminate the pain. On the other hand, she was obsessed with strong sensory stimulation, even the pain she was most familiar with and hated the most. Her eyes were closed, and the hand holding the bottle was trembling slightly. Her knuckles were faintly white because she used too much force. Bang! The glass bottle couldn't withstand her strength and suddenly burst open, which woke the girl from her extreme excitement. The red crystals flew everywhere, and most of them fell to the ground. The glass shards stung her hand with blood, but she didn't seem to feel it. The girl frantically picked up the crystal from the ground and sucked them. She even lay on the ground and licked them until there was nothing left on the ground. She began to use her tongue to lick her palm. The glass shards scratched the surface of her tongue, her mouth, and the corner of her mouth, but she didn't feel it. Her body was hot, and the aphrodisiac began to take effect. But compared to the crazy feeling that stimulated her brain, this desire was nothing. Soon, the crystals in her hand were not enough. The girl's mind was extremely clear, but it was filled with endless desire. She began to rummage around. From the dressing table to the bedside table, she violently searched, smashed, and destroyed the decorations, but the red crystals never appeared again, until she lifted the quilt that was spread flat on the bed. She was shocked. Countless blood-red crystals, shining with a strange light, were quietly spread in front of her, shining brightly. "You were looking for me?" Gun Yin stood outside his room and looked at Gu Nan in confusion. Ever since Gu Nan brought the news of the immortal demon world, the focus of the entire care for one's family had changed. The martial arts tournament was almost completely handed over to Gu Nan, and she had already taken over the matters of plane colonization. This was a plane that few reincarnators set foot on, rich in resources and large in scale. No force could miss it. In the past few days, she had been very busy, but Gunan was looking for her at this time. It was most likely something important. What could it be? Gunan pointed to her room. "Do you see it?" Gunyan was slightly startled. Just as she was about to extend her consciousness to take a look, she suddenly felt a chill around her body. She didn't know when, but she was standing in darkness. Shadows surrounded her from all directions. Eternal Domain Realm. Gunyan almost cried out in surprise. She frantically urged her own magical power, only to find that the surrounding laws had long been sealed by Gunan. The few magical powers she was proficient in had all been dismantled. Gunyin couldn't speak at this time. She could only stare at Gunan. Her gaze was both surprised and complicated. She was surprised that Gunan would attack her, and surprised at the speed of his growth. His breakthrough didn't seem to need any accumulation at all. In just a few months, he had reached this point. Furthermore, it was only a single exchange, but he actually saw through me completely. She didn't even have a chance to use her backup plans before they were completely sealed. This made her feel a sense of defeat. How could she know that Gunan's understanding of the mapping laws was deeper than hers? As long as he could decipher a few basic laws, it would be enough to render most of her methods ineffective. Using one's own power to seal the laws was one of the characteristics of the Eternal Domain realm. Gunan's shadow power had reached the 3rd level, so she finally had this ability. Thus, she used it to deal with Gunyin immediately. Do you really think that you can escape unscathed after scheming against me? Gunan reached out and patted her face. He said with a smile, "Even if I don't mind, I still have to teach you a lesson." The next moment, countless shadows poured into her mouth and wandered around her body, dispersing all the internal energy in her body. A dignified, transcendent expert had suddenly become an ordinary person. Moreover, because of the residual shadows in her body, she couldn't even move. Gunan lifted Gunyin's delicate body with one hand and threw her into the room. Chapter 61. A messy room, a half-naked girl, a demonic blood-red crystal and fresh blood intertwined, and the girl was lying in this blood, a blurry, ambiguous smile on her face. When Gunyin was thrown into the room, this was the scene he saw. Gunyin felt as if a bomb had gone off in his head. Shame, unbearable, anger, and countless other emotions surged in his heart. This was like a girl who pretended to be a good girl at home, but actually went out to bars all day, and one day found out that the person who asked her out was her own father. Even when her strength was surpassed by Gunan, and she had no power to fight back, she had never felt this way. Strength could make up for it, but how did he know? She wanted to go out and question him, but when she turned around, she saw a piece of paper passed in through the crack of the door. On it was written the names of the girls she had met since she was young. Without exception, they were all young girls between the ages of 12 to 16. The more Gunyin read, the colder his heart became. Another list flashed in his mind. That was the list Gu-Nan circled Shirmiao, Er's name during the battle with the Long family. Could it be that he had suspected it from that time? "Young master, Miss Bai is here." Next to Gunyin's room, Gunan was fiddling with a white crystal when Lin Jun's voice sounded from outside the door. "Come in." Gunan's voice had a rare hint of expectation. Bai Luo walked in, puzzled, not knowing why Gunan was looking for her so late at night. Lin Jun, who was following behind her, had a strange expression on her face. She could more or less guess what was going to happen next, so she didn't want to stay and watch. At this time, Gunan had also finished debugging. The white crystal was a projector, and it projected an image onto the opposite wall. It was the image of Gunyin's room. Lin Yunyun was lying on the bed covered with red crystals, her face full of intoxication. The image of her rubbing her body was very visually impactful. I'm going to get a pinhole." Bai Luo thought that was a bad image, so she quickly covered her eyes and shouted. Gunan laughed involuntarily and said, "Don't be in such a hurry to cover your eyes. Look at who that is." When Bai Luo heard this, she peeked through her fingers suspiciously and saw a familiar figure. Eldest senior sister. Gunyin had already walked to the front of the bed, quietly looking at the young girl in front of him. His face was no longer calm, only a kind of indescribable complexity. Since he had already been discovered by Gunan, then why not? No, he definitely had other plans. For example, he must have been secretly recording it. No, as long as that information was exposed, the result would be the same. Gunyin had never been so conflicted in his life. Even after discovering his strange hobby, he had never hesitated as much as he did today. No matter how unscrupulous it was fine to do it behind closed doors, but it was a different matter to be stared at by others. But this young girl was really charming. According to Gun Yin's experience of countless women, the young girl in front of her couldn't be more than 14 years old, and her addiction to drugs had brought her a strong stimulation. Gun Yin tentatively touched her cheek, but found that her face was shockingly hot. Is it pink? No wonder. Gun Yin touched some of the crystals and immediately understood what had happened. Damn, Gun Yin, he actually did it on my bed. Oh, perhaps it was her movement that awakened Lin Yunyan. The young girl suddenly got up, hugged Gun Yin, and began to frantically kiss the side of her face. There was still blood flowing from her mouth, dripping on the bed, on the surface of the red crystals, and also on Gun Yin's chest, dyeing her white shirt red. The faint smell of blood mixed in the air, and Gun Yin's breathing gradually became heavier. After Shi Miao Er's death, Bai Luo couldn't do it in time, and she hadn't had sex for a long time without reincarnation. Most of Lin Yunyan's clothes had already fallen off due to her tearing. At this moment, Gun Yinji gently pulled on it and it fell down, revealing its pink body. Gun Yin's hand pressed on the young girl's waist, and her whole body began to press down. In the next room, Bai Luo was already stunned. She knew little about the affairs between men and women, let alone women. Lin Jun knew a little, but as the fairy sex heavenly lady, she had never experienced it herself. She blushed and wanted to escape, but she didn't know what to say. Only Gunan watched calmly from beginning to end, and his face carried a smile that was overflowing with interest. There wasn't the slightest trace of lust on his face, and he seemed as if he was admiring a piece of art. If justice and light perish one day, only lesbians and Lolas will live forever. Gunan nodded and recited the famous proverb in the game. Of course, it was slightly modified by the players. Bai Luo pulled his sleeve. What were they doing? She felt that it was something bad, but her strong curiosity drove her to continue watching. She could only hope that Gu Nan would stop her verbally. Of course, she was thinking too much. Gu Nan said with a smile, "Of course they're doing something that everyone likes to do." Bai Luo tilted her head and wanted to ask more questions, but Lin Jun hurriedly stopped her. God knew what Gunan would say if she kept asking. On the screen, the two women's actions became more and more intense. As Gun Yin began to roll on the bed, the pink powder entered her body. The strong aphrodisiac began to take effect, and her consciousness gradually blurred. "Do you know why your eldest senior sister took you to ascend?" Gunan asked suddenly. Bai Luo was stunned and shook her head in confusion. "Eldest senior sister treats me well. Why was she nice to you?" Gunan smiled and answered his own question. "The answer is simple. Maybe one day in the near future, you'll also be the one in the screen." "You mean?" Bai Luo finally reacted, and her face began to turn pale. She remembered that when she first met eldest senior sister, she was only 14 years old. At that time, eldest senior sister took good care of her, and sometimes even slept with her. Oh, when the scenes of the past appeared in her mind, Bai Luo only felt goosebumps all over her body, and the screen also reached the most intense moment. There was no clothing on the bed, only two colors of red and white intertwined. Although the crystal could not transmit sound, because it was in the next room, there was still a faint moan. Thus, Bai Luo's cheeks began to redden, and even her body faintly felt hot. A hand was placed on her shoulder, and the little girl screamed in fear, only to find that it was Gun Nan's hand. Only then did she realize that Gu Nan seemed to have been watching quietly, and even his expression did not change. She looked at Gu Nan in confusion, and some bad thoughts came to her mind. Didn't they say that men would be very excited when they saw a beautiful girl's body? Was there something wrong with him? Bai Luo recalled Gu Nan's previous behavior, and no matter how she looked at it, it did not seem normal, and she could not help but nod in her heart. If Gu Nan knew what she was thinking, he would definitely throw her into the room without saying a word. But now he just smiled and said, "You can't tell your eldest senior sister about what happened today." Why? Bai Luo asked, although she also wanted to pretend that nothing happened. "If she knows, what do you think she will do to you?" Chapter 62. Lei Wuji's laughter was so unbridled that it attracted the attention of many people around him. As one of the outstanding contestants in the group the day after tomorrow, Many people recognized Lilan. They immediately understood what had happened when she was eliminated. I don't know what the people from the Star Cloud Dojo were thinking. They just eliminated Lilan. Isn't that right? Now that she has become a disciple of a transcendent, she might have to thank them. Speaking of which, didn't Master Lei say that he wouldn't accept any more disciples? Maybe Lilan is talented enough to make him fall in love with her. Noisy discussions could be heard from the surroundings. Although the resting area was already noisy, these voices were especially ear-piercing, constantly drilling into the ears of the people from the Star Cloud Dojo. Ludanza finally could not stand it anymore. He stood up and pointed at Lilan. Gunan was the one who didn't want you back then. Go and pick on him if you can. Ludanza, what nonsense are you talking about? Zhang Tao suddenly turned around. His face was terrifyingly gloomy. He was so furious that he almost slapped Lei Wuji's face. Ludanza no longer had any scruples. He said to himself, "Am I wrong again? What does a young master like him know about the recruitment of dojo? He only recruited Lin Yunyan to keep a mistress for himself." Ludanza could be considered to have seized the opportunity to vent the resentment in his heart in one go. He was a pure martial artist. He did not know the inside story of the Long family's destruction, nor did he know much about Hu Wei's strength. He only knew that Gu Nan was a complete layman. "Oh, are you talking about me?" A calm voice came from behind him, as if it was asking him something trivial like, "Have you eaten?" Zhang Tao was shocked. He quickly turned around and wanted to say something, but Ludanza said, "That's right. If you have the ability, then prove to me that you're right." He pointed at Lin Yunyan, who was behind Gunan, and said, "Prove that she's talented and didn't pass because of your selfishness. Am I right?" "Yes." Ludanza's last sentence was directed at the members of the Star Cloud Dojo, which immediately attracted a burst of cheers. After all, most of the martial artists who were willing to participate in the martial arts tournament hated under-the-table manipulation. He looked at Gu Nin provocatively, wanted to see how this young master would deal with this situation. Even care for one's family would have to think twice if he exposed his absurd deeds to the public, right? At this time, Lei Wuji was also watching with great interest. He was very happy to see the internal fighting within the Star Cloud Dojo. However, to everyone's surprise, Gunan did not speak at all. Instead, he directly kicked Ludanza's knee. Kacha! The kick didn't seem fast or slow, but the force behind it was astonishing. Ludanza's right kneecap was instantly shattered, and his entire leg was bent at a horrifying angle. You! Ludanza cried out in pain, but before he could speak, Gunan actually kicked him again. In the blink of an eye, his left leg was also broken, and he knelt on the ground. However, the way he knelt was terrifying. His two calves were in front of his body. "Young Master Nan." Zhang Tao quickly stood in front of Ludanza and pleaded, "Young Master Nan, Danza, openly despising the judges, you will be disqualified from the martial arts tournament for life." Gunan's face was expressionless, and he spoke slowly as if the person who had just injured Ludanza was not him at all. Zhang Tao was dumbfounded, and Ludanza was even more shocked. He pointed at Gunan angrily and roared, "What right do you have to do this? What right do you have?" However, Gunan had no intention of continuing to speak. He turned around and walked away. He didn't need to explain anything to anyone. Ludanza wanted him to prove it was even more laughable. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted the martial arts tournament to go according to plan, he could have just killed him. What was there to prove? "Your Excellency, please wait." At this time, Lei Wuji finally spoke. "Your Excellency, who are you to be able to disqualify a contestant?" He looked at Gunan's back, and the smile on his face showed that victory was in his grasp. In his eyes, this young man was too stupid. He had publicly angered the crowd in front of so many people. He had given himself the best weapon. Lei Wuji was usually domineering, but he was also a meticulous person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to run such a large martial arts school. As expected, as soon as his words came out, it immediately resonated with countless people. Many people began to speak up, demanding an explanation from Gunan. He could disqualify Ludanza just like that, but who knew if they would be next? not to mention the fact that Gunan was acting so arrogantly. Gunan finally frowned. He turned around and walked over. Lei Wuji's smile widened. He wasn't afraid that his opponent would do anything out of desperation. He had the absolute advantage in strength. Lei Wuji suddenly felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. A pitch-black dagger had sunk into his abdomen at some point. A strange and majestic energy constantly surged out, completely suppressing his extraordinary strength. What was going on? Was it because of this dagger? In the end, Lei Wuji was still a transcendent expert. In the face of death, he let out a furious roar and punched out. However, Gunan's movements were even faster. He punched him in the face, and this extraordinary master was instantly sent flying, falling straight into the crowd. The shadow energy in his abdomen was still wildly destroying his vitality. Even if he could be saved, his strength would be greatly reduced. The entire resting area fell silent. A transcendent expert had been sent flying with a single punch. This was an unimaginable scene that left everyone speechless. Li Lan was even more dumbfounded. She had never imagined that her master, whom she viewed as the symbol of invincibility, would be sent flying like a sack. More importantly, the person who had attacked was this guy. Gunan's actions had caused too much of a commotion. Lei Wuji's heavy injury had attracted everyone's attention. Several people immediately stood up. Gunan, you've gone too far. The person who had stood up to rebuke him was an old man with white hair and a face full of wrinkles. He was the leader of the Martial Dojo Alliance and the highly respected dojo master Zhou Shuwen. Aubergiste Zhou was so angry that his beard was trembling. Lei Wuji could be considered his junior, but now he had been seriously injured in front of everyone, and it was all because of a quarrel. The martial dojos were a special existence. They could not compare to the major forces, so they had to work together. He helped Lei Wuji up and was even more furious at Gunan for hitting him so hard. How arrogant and despotic. Is this how Gu Qianqi teaches his juniors? Zhou Shuwen's seniority was extremely high. The Gu Qianqi he mentioned was the second great uncle of the care for one's family. Aubergiste Zhou's appearance could be said to be a shot in the arm for everyone. In the end, evil could not prevail over good in this world. Someone could stand up and uphold justice. At this moment, another voice came from the door. Aubergiste Zhou is right. Everyone looked over and saw a row of military officers in dark green uniforms standing in an orderly manner. The person who had spoken was the young man in the lead. Hu Daobin was standing next to him with a gloating smile on his face. He seemed to be waiting to see what would happen to Gunan. Chapter 63. In the resting area, the young man in military uniform stood at the door with a cold smile. He concluded that no matter how powerful Gunan was, he could only admit defeat this time. No one dared to fight the military head-on. Meanwhile, Zhou Shuwen helped Lei Wuji up with a livid face, while Lu Danza was kneeling on the ground, unable to get up. He could only shout, "Mr. Zhou, you must seek justice for me." Zhou Shuwen nodded solemnly. "Don't worry. The martial arts tournament is a serious matter. How could he be allowed to do as he pleases?" Lu Danza's expression eased a little. Gunan's merciless act of breaking his legs had made him completely hate Gunan. Now that you've offended Aubergiste Zhou, let's see how you're going to deal with this. Gunan's calm gaze swept around, his face still expressionless. He had never taken these people seriously. It was like doing a mission. There would always be monsters jumping out to stop you in the process. There was nothing special about it. If there was a monster, you could just kill it. So he gently clenched his right hand, and the pitch-black shadow sword was already in his hand. Seeing that Gunan was really planning to attack, the young man in military uniform's expression turned cold. He waved his right hand, and more than 10 machine guns were aimed at Gunan. They were from the military and had nothing to do with the police. They were just looking for an excuse to cause trouble. Major General Huang, wait. Just as the two sides were about to fight, another voice rang out, and a group of people walked in from the door. This time, it was people from Care for One's Family. The leader was one of the elders from Care for One's Family. His name was Gu Tianling, and he was also Gu Nian's great-uncle. Second great-uncle Gu Tianxi, Gu Mingyuan, and the others were mainly focused on the plane colonization. The matters of the astral realm were left to Gu Tianling to handle. This old man was famous for his gentleness when he was young, and he was the best at handling relationships. Sure enough, as soon as he appeared, he flattered the young man in uniform. Then, he smiled apologetically and said, "Our Gu Nan is young and impetuous. Please don't lower yourself to his level, Major General Huang. Let this old man talk to him." Major General Huang curled his lips in disdain and waved his hand to signal his men to put away their guns. This was a sign of agreement. On the other side, Zhou Shuwen snorted and said, "There are still people here who want to control the martial arts tournament. How do you explain that?" Zhou Shuwen's status in the Jianghu was too high. Gu Tianling hurriedly swore, "Brother Zhou, don't worry. From today onwards, we won't let Gunin interfere in the matters of the martial arts tournament." Seeing his sincerity, Zhou Shuwen snorted and didn't say anything else, waiting to see how he would deal with it. Gu Tianling tried hard to appease both sides. Then, he looked at Gunan, only to see that he was still standing there motionless. Gu Tianling suddenly became angry. "Gunan, why are you still standing there?" Gu Tianling's face was gloomy as he scolded. "The martial arts tournament is a grand event for all the warriors on the planet. It's not up to you to decide. Go home and reflect on yourself." Gunan didn't reply. Even his eyes didn't waver. His gaze swept past Gu Tianling and saw Gu Xingzhu behind him. Only then did he show a faint smile. The people from Care for One's family came so quickly. Someone must have tipped them off. It seemed that Gu Nian hadn't revealed his true strength to these people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so stupid. As for those old guys from Care for One's family, they obviously didn't understand what Gunan meant to them. They really thought that he was just a guest in their family. But it was meaningless. When had Gunan ever cared about their lives? "Since everyone is here, I'll inform you all together." Gunan pressed the shadow, sword against the ground. He looked around and said, "I'll only say it once." His voice was calm and cold. "How, where, when, and how the martial arts tournament will be held will be decided by me. If anyone has any objections, they can go die." As soon as he finished speaking, the whole resting area fell into silence. Everyone was shocked by Gu Nan's arrogant words. Gu Tianling was the first to react. Blue veins popped up on his forehead as he roared, "Are you crazy? You!" Before he finished speaking, a gust of cold wind had already hit him. A sword light that was hard to see with the naked eye flashed by. He stopped moving as if a video was stuck. The scene was very funny. Grand Uncle Gu Xingzhu, who was behind him, looked up in confusion. Only then did she realize that there was already a thin line of blood on Gu Tianling's neck. The next moment, his head slid down diagonally. Gunan killed him with one strike. "Gunan, what are you doing?" Gu Xingzhu's hands were trembling. She would never have thought that Gunan would actually attack a member of Care for One's family. And it was a fatal strike. Gunan didn't even look at her. His cold eyes moved to Major General Huang. Major General Huang suddenly felt cold. He had a bad feeling in his heart, but he still tried to calm himself down. He wouldn't dare to attack me. Otherwise, he would become the enemy of the entire interstellar government. That would be asking for death. Major General Huang gritted his teeth, still hesitating whether he should speak or not. On the other side, Old Master Zhou Shuwen had already flown into a rage. He quickly rushed to Gunan. "Killing in court. You're defying the law. Do you know what you're doing?" Zhou Shuwen stared at Gu Nan angrily. "Gu Tianling is saving Care for One's family and also saving you. Turn yourself in to the military immediately. Otherwise, the century-old foundation of Care for One's family will be destroyed in your hands." Zhou Shuwen saw that Gu Nan didn't move, so he said coldly, "What? You still want to attack me?" Gu Nan, who was originally expressionless, almost laughed out loud when he heard the last sentence. It was really funny to see a humanoid monster jumping up and down and saying such strange words in the end. However, the laughter didn't affect Gu Nan's actions. The shadow sword in his hand slowly disappeared, but his palm was as fast as lightning. He directly slapped Zhou Shuwen's face. Pa! This slap landed squarely on Aubergiste Zhou's face. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. His old face froze for a moment before it flushed red. He was surprised by Gunan's quick action, but he also couldn't believe that Gunan actually dared to attack him. Does this be asterisk start? Kid, know who I am? For a martial artist of his age, one word from me is enough to make it difficult for him to establish a foothold in the entire red carp. Gu Xingzhu, who was next to him, was already speechless. Her mind was filled with the thought, I'm finished. If she had known that Gunan had such a temper, she definitely wouldn't have brought the people from Care for One's family here. After today, either Care for One's family and Gu Nan would completely break off relations, or they would become enemies with the entire red carp. Aubergiste Zhou was so angry that his hands were shaking. He pointed at Gunan shakily. You pa! Gunan slapped him again. The old master still couldn't dodge it. This time, he also couldn't say anything. After living like a prince for so many years, he had already regarded martial arts as a way to strengthen his body. Instead, he had forgotten how to fight to the death. Gunan wouldn't be courteous with him. A sinister smile appeared on his face. This old man's strength was actually quite good. He was much stronger than Gu Tianling. At least, he was already in the refinement realm. It was just that he was old and weak. Chapter 64. Gunan's wanton killing cast a shadow over the entire martial arts tournament. A large number of contestants even chose to withdraw from the tournament as a form of protest. Gunan couldn't be bothered with these people. Withdrawing from the tournament was a good thing for him. The original 3-day tournament was forcefully shortened to 1 day by him. For Gunan, he only needed the martial arts tournament to be held as usual. It didn't matter who won or lost, who became famous or who failed. According to Gunan's experience, the focus of the sin value in the event was on Lin Yunyun, not the martial arts tournament itself. Most of the sin events and missions in the Evil God game weren't purely about doing evil. Otherwise, one could level up just by killing indiscriminately. How could it be so easy? It was either a clear target like by Lolawa's blackening, or it allowed the players to do whatever they wanted. But there must be a key point. To put it bluntly, the free event was just to hide the target. Players could only obtain sin value by scouting. For example, in this martial arts tournament incident, Gunan believed that Lin Yunyun was the key. So he lured Lin Yunyun to take drugs and sent her to Gunyun's bed. The outside world is in a mess because of you, but you're leisurely drinking tea here by yourself. A voice sounded beside Gunan. He didn't even raise his head and continued to sit by himself. The person who came was Lan Marigold, who hadn't appeared for a long time after returning from the immortal and demon world. Gunan yawned in boredom. I've always been focused on what I want to do. Didn't you want to take full control of the martial arts tournament? When no one objected to it, why didn't you do anything? Lu Zhanyu pulled out a chair and sat down as if he was very familiar with her. Gunan was too lazy to say more. If you have something to say, then say it. If not, then scram. As if expecting Gunan's vulgarity, Lan Marigold spread her hands helplessly. Gunyan asked me to come. She told you to stay away from the limelight after this incident. Hearing this, Gunan couldn't help but glance at her and curl his lips. The fact that Gunyan asked her to come meant that he was aware of their relationship, but she probably couldn't guess how they met. Seeing that Gunan didn't seem to care, Lan Marigold couldn't help but frown. You killed too much this time. Killing Huang Qi isn't a big deal. Anyway, you're at the Eternal Domain realm. It's more trouble for you to kill Zhou Shuwen. Lan Marigold was also from an aristocratic family. The Luca clan was only a branch, and its main branch was in the distant 4th-star domain. Thus, she was more familiar with the twists and turns of events. It was true that Huang Qi had an uncle who was a military commander, but he had many nephews. There was no need for him to cause trouble for an eternal domain powerhouse for a dead person. On the other hand, Zhou Shuwen had been running a martial arts dojo his whole life. Who knew how many students he had taught? Who knew if there were any monsters among them? To these people, there was only one teacher, and he had been beaten to death in his later years. This hatred had to be avenged. However, Gunan still had an indifferent attitude and casually said, "Let's wait until the martial arts tournament is over. I will know where to go when the time comes." Since it was a chain of events, there would definitely be new events after the martial arts tournament was over. Lu Jianyu furrowed his brows and heard the sound of footsteps coming from the door. He had no choice but to remain silent and disappear without a trace. "Young master, the results of the martial arts tournament are out," said Wang Dong respectfully, still dressed in a black suit. Gunan took the final result from his hands and said with a faint smile, "Why are you still here? Care for one's family still dares to cooperate with me?" Wang Dong's expression didn't change. He only revealed a meaningful smile. "The old masters might not dare, but the eldest miss does." Gunan was stunned for a moment, and then he laughed loudly. "I thought she really did it for the family, but it turns out that she is the same as Lan Marigold. She doesn't hesitate when it comes to cheating her own people." At the same time, the Hall of Care for One's Family was filled with a fierce argument. The conflict between the two sides was nothing more than how to deal with their relationship with Gunan. This matter involved the life and death of Care for One's Family. Thus, not only were the higher-ups of the family present, but some of the younger generation were also present. Gunan is too domineering. Sooner or later, he will die a violent death. If the family continues to maintain a close relationship with him, it will only cause an unexpected disaster. He is already an eternal domain expert. Can we still fall out with him? That's right. Except for the one in Sue's family, no one could stop him now. If he turns around and kills Care for One's Family, who will stop him? Tianling died at his hands. Are we just going to let it go? What do you want? The elders of Care for One's Family were divided into two groups, and no one could convince the other. Second great-uncle Gu Tianqi sat in the main seat, his face full of worry. His hair seemed to have turned a lot whiter overnight. He was the real leader of Care for One's Family, so he naturally knew that he must not fall out with Gunan. Otherwise, Care for One's Family would fall apart overnight. For someone like Gunan, who was all alone and possessed peerless strength, no one could restrain him at all. But Gu Tianling had the best relationship with him. Why had this bastard reached the Eternal Domain realm? If he had only reached the Refinement realm, maybe Care for One's Family would have already attacked and killed him. But after seeing what had happened to Zhou Shuwen, no one dared to act rashly. The group of people gradually quieted down because both sides found that they could not convince the other at all. It was better to let Gu Tianqi make the decision. "Second brother, you decide." "Yes, second brother, no matter how you decide to deal with it. We will support you." Gu Tianqi was silent for a long time. In the end, he sighed and said, "Gunyan, what do you think?" Suddenly, half of the people's eyes darkened, while the other half became complacent. Everyone knew that Gu Nin had been brought in by Gunyan. Did she even need to think about her opinion? Gu Tianqi's choice to ask her attitude had already expressed his opinion. Gunyan's face was expressionless as he calmly said, "About Gunan, wait." A crisp voice suddenly sounded, interrupting Gunyan's words. A young girl was slowly walking over, holding a stack of information in her hand. "Xingzhu, what are you doing here?" An old man frowned and asked. The person who had come was Gu Xingzhu. At this moment, she seemed to have a card up her sleeve. She bowed and said, "Great-grandfather, I received news that Zhou Shuwen is seriously injured and on the verge of death. The 7-star squad has already rushed back to the 9-star sector." 7-star squad? The old man's expression suddenly became serious. He was not unfamiliar with the name 7-star squad. It was a team made up of 7 nuance realm powerhouses that specialized in hunting eternal domain realm star beasts. They had also come from a 9-star sector in the past, but their current cultivation level was already much higher than theirs. More importantly, among the 7 of them, 5 were Zhou Shuwen's direct disciples. There was no need for Gunyan to say anything now. Even Gu Tianqi looked over. Gu Xingzhu was beaming with joy. Her entire being was different from usual. This was a bit like her younger self. Ever since Gunyan became a transcendent, he hadn't seen her like this for a long time. All the elders seemed to have understood something. This girl didn't get along with Gunyan in the past. During this period of time, it looked like she had completely sided with Gunyan but that wasn't the case deep down. Gu Xingzhu distributed the information in her hands. When it reached Gun Yin, she paused for a moment and revealed a bright smile. Gun Yin just glanced at her indifferently, the corners of his mouth curling up into a smile. It really is the 7-star squad. But even though the 7 stars are strong, do they have the ability to kill Gu Nan? One of the elders asked. If Gu Nan was allowed to escape with his life, the consequences would be unimaginable. Gu Xingzhu seemed to be prepared for this. She continued to speak in her unique, clear voice. It is the 7-star squad that wants to find Gu Nan. We don't have to personally come forward. At the end of the information, we already have a suitable candidate. All the elders hurriedly flipped to the end of the information. Sure enough, there was another person's information. Chapter 65. Innate Stage Champion, Lu Wu. Acquired Stage Champion, Lin Yunyan. They're all acquaintances. Gunan looked at the results of the martial arts tournament in his hand and curled his lips. After Gunan's torment, the martial arts tournament, which was originally the focus of attention, became less and less people paid attention to it. Because too many people died and were injured today, and their backgrounds were too big. In addition, more than half of the contestants in the martial arts tournament had withdrawn. Even if they won the championship, it didn't mean anything. Naturally, no one paid attention to it. Young master, are you going to present the award in person? Wang Dong asked cautiously. Gunan was first appointed as a judge by Gun Yin, but he was lazy and didn't go to watch any of the matches. He hid here alone and drank tea. Anyway, the main point of the event had been completed, and the results of the competition had nothing to do with Gunan. Just find someone else. Gunan waved his hand and said, Yes. Wang Dong nodded, but then he seemed to think of something and quickly said, By the way, someone reported that Lin Yunyun used stimulants during the competition. She definitely used it. Otherwise, she couldn't even compete. Gunan said impatiently, If anyone has any objections, just kill them. There was no doubt that Lin Yunyun had to take drugs before the competition. She had to rely on this to relieve the pain, otherwise, she couldn't fight at all. Previously, he was still concerned about the task. Now that the event was about to be completed, what else did Gunan have to worry about? Understood. Wang Dong nodded repeatedly. I'll arrange for someone to do it immediately. Wang Dong's figure disappeared, but Lan Marigold appeared again. Gunan showed a face of surprise and said, You haven't left yet? Lan Marigold rolled her eyes. She didn't believe that with Gunan's current cultivation, he wouldn't be able to find out whether she had left or not. It was obvious that he was chasing her away. There's one person. If he accidentally offends you, I hope you can spare his life. Lan Marigold said quickly. Oh, Gunan raised his eyebrows. He's my little cousin. Why do you think I'll listen to you? Gunan raised his head slightly and smiled. You have a grudge against this Lu Wu, right? You wanted to kill him? With 3 consecutive rhetorical questions, Lu Zhanyu swallowed all the words he wanted to say, and his face twitched a little. This guy's suspicion is really... Did he think in the opposite direction? In fact, Lu Zhanyu had really misunderstood Gunan. It was not that he was very considerate, but he was used to speculating about others with the worst of intentions. Lu Zhanyu wanted to play some tricks, but he ran into a wall at the last second. He could only turn around and leave without another word. After Gu Nan sat quietly for a while, the evil god's temple in his mind shook slightly. Completed evil event. Martial arts tournament. Total sin points, 10. The martial arts tournament officially ended, and the sin points reward was given. The reward of 10 sin points was not out of Guam Nan's expectation. The difficulty of this event was neither high nor low. The martial arts tournament was only a setting and time limit, and it could be controlled by the players themselves, which lowered the external difficulty. However, finding the key person and getting an extraordinaire like Gunyin to participate was not easy, so it was given 10 sin points. The next moment, a new event message came from the evil god's Lin. Evil event triggered. Adopt orphan Lin Yunyun. Lin Yunyun? Orphan? Gunan raised his eyebrows and shouted at the door. Old Wang. Wang Dong hurried in and heard Gunan say, Lin Yunyun has a dead father at home, right? Find someone to kill him. This time, Wang Dong did not say much and agreed. Lin Yunyan's family was poor, and killing an ordinary person was nothing to care for one's family. Young master, Lin Yunyan has a sister. Sister? How old is he? Gunan asked after thinking for a while. 17. Oh, then let's kill her too. She's too old. In the clean hospital, Lu Danza sat on the bed with a pale face, holding an injury report in his hand. On it was written, comminuted fracture of kneecap, high energy damage cannot be removed, recovery rate of injury is low. With the medical level of the red carp, a broken leg was not a big deal. However, the shadow power left by Gu Nan formed a high energy state, which made most medical methods ineffective. As a result, Lu Danza would probably be unable to stand and become a cripple. Son of a bitch. Lu Danza punched the quilt hard, and the report was crumpled, but he could not vent his anger. From a martial arts genius to a cripple with a broken leg, from a promising transcendent, it was all because of that man's 2 kicks. Why? Why is that scumbag a transcendent? Is there any justice in the world? Lu Danza clenched his fists, and his eyes were red. Just as he was sitting alone in the ward, roaring crazily, a voice came from the side. We can give you justice, but the question is, what can you pay for it? Lu Danza suddenly looked up and saw 7 people standing in a row at the door of his ward. The leader was quite recognizable because he had 3 hands. The world could function without anyone. Gunan's massacre was enough to shake the entire upper-class society of the Redfish planet. But to the ordinary citizens, it was just that this year's martial arts tournament was a little shorter. After the martial arts competition, the military fell silent. Some people said that Hu Wei left the red carp overnight after learning the news, and no one knew where she went. Zhou Shuwen was sent to the hospital immediately, but because his injuries were too serious and he was too old, he died after struggling for 3 days. Care for One's family didn't say anything about it. They neither broke with Gu Nan, nor stood out to unite with him, as if they had become bystanders. However, Zhou Shuwen had great influence in all walks of life, especially in the martial arts world. Countless of his disciples organized spontaneously and publicly demanded that Gu Nan be punished. Some of them marched in the street, some blocked the door of care for One's family, and some ran to the Su family to ask the old man of the Su family to come out and do justice. Of course, it didn't work. Naturally, there were politicians to deal with them, and Care for One's family and the Su family didn't care about these people. As for why no one came to Gu Nan directly, first, no one was willing to die. Second, there were too few people who knew him, and Gu Nan's whereabouts were mysterious and difficult to trace. But today was different, because Gu Nan finally appeared in a relatively public place. Capital Children's Welfare Home. On a tall building not far away, Lu Danza sat in a wheelchair and looked nervously at the welfare home downstairs. Beside him stood a fashionably dressed blue-haired girl. Chapter 66. Outside the welfare center, the 4th of the 7-star squad was stunned. He couldn't understand why someone could still move after being hit by his darts. Could it be that this person's physique was stronger than the astral beasts in the endless void? This question didn't linger for long. When he saw the smile on Gunan's face, he had a bad feeling. The next moment, he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. His whole body was sent flying, and then he fell heavily. He's not dead? Nuanced state. Old Four spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His heart was already filled with alarm, and Gunan's fleeting voice also entered his ears at this moment. He tried to stand up, but he only felt a gust of wind in front of him. He tilted his head and felt the left side of his face burning. Gu Nan appeared. The dragon heart pendant in front of his chest was still glowing. His punch, enhanced by the giant dragon power, hit the left side of the 4th's face and tore it off. The left side of the 4th's face was torn off, along with the skin and flesh. Countless pulsing blood vessels and broken facial bones were revealed. Without the support of the eye socket, the eyeball naturally fell off, and only a few optic nerves were still connected. To the 4th, sorrowful cries could be heard as a few silhouettes appeared and surrounded the 4th brother. Their faces were filled with grief and indignation. They were scattered around, waiting for Gu Nan to run for his life so that they could stop him. But who would have thought Lan Bing was among them? At this moment, her face was no longer as calm as before. She roared, "Kill! Kill him! What kind of bullsh**T strategy is that? Everyone, let's go!" The burly man with 3 arms was the first to rush forward, screaming, "Aw, let me do it!" His body was 4 times the size of a normal person. Other than his 4 normal limbs, there was also a giant hand on his neck, which looked especially scary. This burly man was Han Ling Tian, ranked 2nd in the 7-star squad. He was born with great strength and had a straightforward personality. He was best at using brute force to kill his opponents. He was also one of Zhou Shuwen's disciples. When he was young, he didn't know any martial arts and was often bullied in his hometown. Later on, he embarked on the path of cultivation and became unstoppable. He had only just stepped into the refinement realm, but he was already one of the strongest of the 7. At this moment, he leaped high, his 3 arms spread out, and attacked Gunan from 3 different angles. However, Gunan's expression was still cold. He raised his hand and punched Han Lingtian's face without hesitation. He actually ignored Han Lingtian's attack and wanted to exchange blows with him. Han Lingtian was rough but meticulous. Even though he was furious, his movements were extremely precise. A punch to the side of his face, a punch to the neck, and a punch to the heart. He believed that as long as his 3 punches landed, even a real giant beast would suffer a great loss. This person actually dared to fight head-on with me. I must teach him a lesson. Bang, 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 bang. Both of them hit each other at almost the same time, but the result was unexpected. Gunan still stood where he was, not moving an inch, but Han Lingtian was sent flying and smashed into a nearby building. "Second brother, how are you?" Lan Bing hurriedly went to check and saw Han Lingtian covering his nose with 1 hand and walking out with bloodshot eyes. He mumbled, "Is very strong." Lan Bing's anger grew. "We underestimated him. But no matter how strong he is, he will die here today." "That's right. Big sis, let's attack together." The other members of the 7 Stars squad finally stabilized the 4th's injuries and spoke at the same time. Not only was the crowd excited, but Gunan was frowning and touching the side of his face. He had a strong physique, and with the passive effect of damage reduction by 50%, he was not injured at all. In fact, due to the dulling effect, his sense of pain was blocked by more than half, and he didn't feel anything at all. "But my damage is too low." Gunan shook his head. When he killed Zhou Shuwen, he felt that his damage was starting to fall behind since he had been focusing on his survivability. There was no problem with the passive skill, but the key was his weapon, the 4 origin crossbow that he used when he was at level 2, and it could no longer keep up with the times. Thus, he sank his consciousness into the evil god's temple, opened the equipment list, and selected a weapon. He had wanted to buy this weapon for a long time, and it was very compatible with his attributes. However, he had not been able to deal enough damage, so he did not buy it. After all, it was too expensive. Purchasing weapon, Blade of the Bloody King. 500 points will be deducted. Confirm? Confirm. Gunan clicked confirm while feeling heartache. After deducting the 500 points, he was only left with 100 points. The Bloody King's Blade, which was also known as the Blood Sword by the players, was a true level 3 weapon that could only be purchased by level 3 evil gods. Be it the price or power, the 4 origin crossbow could not compare to it. The attributes of the Blood Sword were very simple, and its purpose was also very clear, which was extreme damage. Bloody King's Blade. High attack, ignores additional defense, sharpness enhancement, triggers blood curse when an attack hits. There was also a small line of words at the back. This is a cursed godly weapon. Whenever your attack hits your opponent, you will receive the same amount of damage. The 100% armor penetration, the sharpness enhancement effect, and the Blood Sword's own super high attack made this weapon far more powerful than it was worth. Therefore, the game designer was very considerate and added a debuff to it, which meant hurting others and hurting oneself. Any player who used this weapon to attack would receive the same amount of damage as the enemy, which greatly reduced the overall strength of the weapon. However, the players were very intelligent, and they quickly found the attributes that complemented the weapon from other equipment and skills. For example, Gunan had the passive and Dawn's praise effects, which not only reduced damage, but also had 3 times the self-recovery ability. Come on, let's hurt each other. Outside the welfare center, Lin Yunyun stared blankly at Gunan for a while, her eyes slightly unfocused. Just as she was about to speak, she saw that he had already recovered. At the same time, he raised his right hand, and a long sword appeared out of thin air. The sword was blood-red in color, and the blade was long and thin. It emitted a faint blood-red glow and looked very demonic. Gunan had never used the blood sword in his past life, and this was the first time he held it in his hands. He had to admit that it felt good, and there was even a faint sense of bloodlust in his brain. Then, let's kill. Gunan looked at the 7-star squad from afar, and his originally calm gaze was gradually dyed with a hint of madness. Together, Lan Bing put the 4th aside and looked coldly at Gunan and said in a low voice, "Ah." Han Lingtian rubbed his nose and continued to charge forward while screaming, "Ah." Even when they were attacking the Galactic Beast, he still took on the role of a meat shield, and their team had always had a clear division of labor. This time, the enemy was indeed very strong, but the 7-star squad was not to be trifled with. In Han Lingtian's mind, it was as if those years when the 7 of them roamed the universe, killing one dire beast after another, those magnificent scenes. Why am I flying? In Han Lingtian's vision, he seemed to be flying, and the scene was still flying up and down, and the world was spinning. In the eyes of the others, it was Gunan who had floated over and slashed at his head. Chapter 67. Gunan held the blood-red sword in his hand. Blood spurted out from the wound, dyeing half of his body red. He looked like a demon that walked out of the abyss. After decapitating the enemy, the blood sword flashed red. Gunan felt a slight chill on his neck. 1/3 of his neck had been cut open. The effect of the blood curse was activated. The damage was exactly equal to the damage inflicted on Gunan. However, Gunan had the passivation skill. Not only did it reduce the damage, but it also blocked most of the pain. It was not affected at all. He stretched out his left hand and pressed it on top of his head, straightening his neck that had been cut in half. The cut was healing quickly. His muscle tissue was regenerating, and his skin was growing back quickly. Why were the blood sword and the Dawn Sage robe complementary equipment? The reason was simple. The effect of Dawn's praise would only take effect if the target was not attacked for 3 seconds. The damage from the blood curse was judged as self-damage, not being attacked. As for the passivation effect, as long as the damage was dealt, it would be reduced. The 3 were a perfect match. The remaining members of the 7-star squad were about to surround and beat up Gunan. However, they saw Han Lingtian being decapitated. They were dumbfounded. Han Lingtian died on the spot. Gunan held the blood sword in one hand and supported his head with the other. He walked towards him step by step. As he walked, the wound on his neck was still bleeding. The whole scene looked very strange. Gunan's pace seemed slow, but he was actually very fast. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived in front of one of the members of the squad. This person was the youngest in the squad. He was once a genius, but he was already prepared. He drew his sword from his waist and charged forward. "Kill!" the young man shouted angrily. "Remember, the name of the person who killed you is Swoosh." Gunan slashed down diagonally, cutting the young man and his sword in half from his right shoulder. The young man's words stopped abruptly. He didn't even get to say his name. A wound appeared on Gunan's right shoulder at the same time. However, it was not as serious as the one on his neck. It was just a bloody mark. This young man's physique and defense were far inferior to Han Lingtian's, so the damage he received was much lower. Under the effect of Praise of Dawn, the wound showed signs of healing before it could spread. It disappeared in the blink of an eye. Lan Bing felt her scalp go numb, but as the commander of the 7-star squad, she forced herself to calm down. Everyone calmed down. She stared at Gunan with her beautiful eyes. "His knife isn't normal, but as long as we avoid it," before she could finish her sentence, she felt a chill on her head. Thus, he subconsciously activated his divine ability, and his entire body instantly disappeared, turning into a cloud of mist that floated to the side before transforming back into his human form. When Lan Bing reappeared, her forehead was covered in cold sweat. She had traveled in the sea of stars for more than 10 years, and she had been through a lot of life-and-death situations, but none of them were as thrilling as this atomization. Interesting. Gunan's voice sounded near and far, as if coming from all directions. Lan Bing suppressed the fear in her heart. Just as she was about to speak, she felt that her surroundings were quiet. She turned around abruptly, and only then did she realize a shocking fact. Her other teammates, including the fourth, who had half of his face torn off, had all been sliced in half. None of them were spared. Only then did Lan Bing realize that Gu Nan had attacked 6 times at the same time. Relying on his incredible speed, he had attacked 6 people at the same time. If it wasn't for her special divine ability that allowed her to turn into mist, which made her unafraid of knives and swords, she would have died under the knife as well. The anger from the wanton slaughter of her teammates and the instinctive fear of death surged in Lan Bing's heart at the same time, causing her to slow down. At this moment, Gunan's knife fell down. However, just as the knife was about to touch Lan Bing, something strange happened. The space above Lan Bing's head seemed to be pulled open layer by layer, and when the blood knife entered it, it was like entering an endless void, unable to fall for a moment. Lan Bing was shocked, and she hurriedly turned into mist and dodged to the side. Space. Gunan's expression became slightly serious as he said softly. The level of the law of space was extremely high, and the person who attacked secretly was quite good. Lan Bing obviously realized what had happened, and a look of surprise appeared on her face. "Thank you, Elder Su, for saving me." As if to echo Lan Bing's words, a figure slowly appeared behind her. It was an ordinary old man in an ordinary gray robe. If he were to be placed on the street, 90% of people would ignore him. However, he was a real big shot in the Red Carp and even the 9-star region. He was the pillar of the Su family, the only eternal domain powerhouse on the Red Carp, Su Yuanjun, Elder Su. When this Elder Su became famous at a young age, it was also when the Su family was in a critical situation and was almost reduced to a second-rate family. It could be said that it was because of Su Yuanjun's efforts to turn the tide that the Su family had survived until now and still stood at the top of the capital region. Apart from him, the extraordinary power of the Su family was far from comparable to that of the Gu and Long families. Su Yuanjun? Even Gu Nin had heard of his name. This person had spatial skills, and although his attack power was not very strong, it was not easy to kill him. Even if it was Gu Nan, he could only think of a brainless way to chase after him and exhaust him to death. But there was no benefit in killing him, so why waste the effort? As a player, Gu Nin just ignored the rules. He never thought of himself as a bloodthirsty person. Well, definitely not. So, Gu Nin calmed himself down and said, "If you want to save this woman, be careful that I slaughter the entire Su family." Lan Bing's eyes suddenly widened, and the anger in her heart surged again. This person was really reckless. He actually dared to threaten Elder Su to his face. Even if he advanced to the Eternal Domain realm, it was impossible for him to be Elder Su's opponent. There were decades of accumulation in between. Su Yuanjun said helplessly, "Lan Bing is the daughter of my good friend. Since you have already killed Aubergiste Zhou to vent your anger, why do you have to kill?" Before he could finish the last word, he felt his vision blur, and Gu Nan's figure suddenly disappeared. A head-on slash. Su Yuanjun was not like Lan Bing, who would ignore Gu Nan's power. His expression was solemn, and the space in front of him once again overlapped, and he was pulled far away. This was a copy of the previous move, but Saint Seiya would not fall for it twice. The moment before Gu Nan's crimson saber fell, the power of shadow suddenly surged out, instantly breaking through the spatial wall. Su Yuanjun's spatial rules were destroyed, so it naturally lost its effect. The old man's expression changed slightly, and he suddenly raised his right hand. His sleeve instantly spread out infinitely large and thick, blocking the saber. In the next moment, His figure had already appeared 10 meters away. He did not suffer any injuries, but his right sleeve was cut off. He frowned and was about to speak, but Gunnan's figure was already close, not giving him any chance at all, and he slashed down again. He can actually use his own speed to keep up with the spatial transfer. Su Yuanjun saw what Gunnan had done, and he was suddenly inexplicably shocked. Was he still King human? In a short span of a second, Gunnan had slashed 31 times, and Su Yuanjun had also teleported 31 times, dodging every attack just in time. However, at the last slash, Su Yuanjun's figure paused, and he could not help but be stunned when he did not see Gunnan following. Then he smiled bitterly and shook his head helplessly. On the other side, Lan Bing, who was still in place, did not even have a chance to react before she was already beheaded by Gunnan. With the full power of shadow erupting, she did not have a chance to atomize at all. It turned out that after 31 teleportations, the palm of Su Yuanjun's soul just happened to miss Lan Bing. A breeze blew, and the grass of the welfare house was already covered with flesh and blood. A faint smell of blood was blown into the noses of the people around. Chapter 68. After standing still for a while, Su Yuanjun finally chose to leave quietly. He and Gunnan couldn't do anything to each other, but he still had his family and relatives. As for Gunnan, it didn't seem like he cared about care for one's family. Seeing that he had left, Gunnan didn't have any intention of chasing after him. He smiled and put away the blood knife. At this time, the injuries on his body had completely recovered. Even the half of his neck that had been broken had completely disappeared. Su Yuanjun was a troublesome person to deal with. Since he was still in the middle of a mission, he wasn't in a hurry to deal with him. As for killing his entire family, killing them wouldn't give him any sin points, so what was there to kill? A true expert would never waste his energy on something that didn't bring him any benefits. Moreover, Su's family was Su Yuanjun's Achilles heel. Keeping his family alive was the best threat. A sword hanging over one's head was often more useful than one that had already fallen. The moment Gunnan led Lin Yunyan out of the welfare center, the evil god's temple sent him another notification. Completed mission. Adopt orphan girl Lin Yunyan. Total sin points, 8. Is there 8 points? Not bad. This way my sin points will reach 120. Gunnan silently calculated the difficulty of this mission and finally nodded. The calculation of sin points was generally related to the difficulty of the mission, especially this kind of mission with a clear goal. The more enemies that obstructed the completion of the mission, the higher the sin points. So sometimes, players would deliberately find trouble for themselves, but there weren't many suitable opportunities. This time, the appearance of the 7-star squad could be considered a stroke of luck for Gunnan. Lu Danza was still sitting in his wheelchair in shock. The thick smell of blood on the grass almost made him feel nauseous. But this kind of sensory stimulation was far inferior to the chill in his heart. He might not know what the 7-star squad was, but a total of 7 extraordinaires had died in the hands of Gunnan. This was the truth in front of him. Lu Danza could not help but sink into deep despair. For the first time, he doubted whether he really had the ability to reach Gunnan's current level in this lifetime, and what realm would Gunnan be at that time. However, there was nothing to be suspicious about, because Gunnan had already walked to his side and was holding Lin Yunyan's hand. "Did you bring them here?" Gunnan lowered his head and asked as if he didn't recognize Lu Danza at all. It was a purely questioning and curious tone, without the slightest hint of threat. Before Lu Danza could reply, Gunnan patted him on the shoulder. "Thank you so much. He sent a wave of monsters to me." As he spoke, he reached out and broke his neck. Lin Yunyan looked up at him. "The way you express your gratitude is really unique. Thank you." Lin Yunyan felt a chill on her neck. Of course, Gunnan wouldn't do anything to Lin Yunyan. Right now, he wanted to take her home and hang her on the wall, then wait for the mission event to refresh. Speaking of which, after the adoption incident, the evil god's temple didn't give any more notifications. This chain of events clearly wasn't over yet, and there were many questions that hadn't been answered. For example, what was Lin Yunyan's background? Gunnan didn't believe that someone would be full of vital energy for no reason. It was obvious that this whole incident had revolved around her, and there had to be some other story behind it. There was no next step, which meant that he hadn't met the conditions to trigger it. For example, the martial arts tournament incident was triggered when Gunan heard about the martial arts tournament from Gunyan. What could it be? Gunan sat in the attic of care for one's family, stroking his chin as he pondered. For a moment, Gunan was stuck on the clues, but the result of the battle between him and the seven-star squad spread at an incredible speed. Perhaps Care for One's family had pushed for it, or perhaps Sue's family had secretly helped, but the result was the same. The seven-star squad had been wiped out, and Gunan's name had spread throughout the entire Red Carp. Even in the Star Zone, his achievements had begun to spread. After Care for One's family heard the result, one of the elders stood up immediately and directly tied up Gu Xingzhu and sent her to Gunan. Gu Xingzhu's clumsy plan of killing with a borrowed knife couldn't be hidden for long, so it was better to admit defeat as soon as possible. So that's how it is. Gunan looked at Gu Xingzhu, then said to the elder of Care for One's family next to him with a smile, "I'm a crude person, and I don't like to use my brain. If you didn't mention it, I wouldn't have thought of it. Can I do whatever I want to her?" Gunan pointed at Gu Xingzhu. The latter's meridians had been sealed, and she was tied up like an ordinary girl with a few hemp ropes. The person who tied her up was obviously a skilled teacher, and he didn't cover any of the places that should be exposed. Instead, he tied up Gu Xingzhu's flat figure in an exquisite manner. Of course, as long as you enjoy yourself. The elder didn't put on airs at all, and even used honorifics. "Anyway, thank you." Gunan smiled and said, "By the way, what's your name?" "Gu Tianwen." Elder Gu Tianwen left Gunan's room with an awkward look on his face, so only he and Gu Xingzhu were left in the room. Gu Xingzhu's mouth was gagged with a white handkerchief, and she sat curled up in the corner. She didn't look like her usual capable and strong self, and looked delicate and pitiful. Gunan took off the handkerchief and said with great interest, "Did Lan Marigold ask you to come? Are you just trying to seduce me, or do you have something else to say?" His words stunned Gu Xingzhu. Her eyes were a little dull, and she could only force herself to say, What are you talking about? Stop pretending." Gunan waved his hand and said, "You work under Gunyan, so why did you get the news about the seven-star squad first, and no one else knows? It's obvious that someone else told you." Recently, the only outsiders who have power outside of the Red Carp are Lan Marigold and her sister, and only she has the motive to do this. That Gu Tianwen, if he's not in cahoots with you, he's just being used by you, and he's specially sent you to me. You want to trap me, and then replace Gunyan? This is also Lan Marigold's intention, right? You really have the heart of a snake and scorpion. Just because Gunyan is aware of it, you want to take the initiative to gain the upper hand? Gunan analyzed with a smile, and added in the end, "You're the one taking the risk, and you're sharing the benefits with that Lu fellow. You're really a lay foam." The corner of Gu Xingzhu's mouth twitched, and her face was a little gloomy. She suddenly had a feeling of being stripped naked and standing in front of someone else, and the other party's gaze was so cold and piercing. But after she was seen through, she relaxed and straightened her body and moved closer to Gunan's ear with a smile, saying, "Don't you want to know what I'm going to use to seduce you?" Chapter 69. When Gu Xingzhu left, her expression was even worse than that of Gu Tianwen's. Of course, her mood wasn't in Gunan's consideration. It wasn't that Gunan wasn't interested in women, but he wasn't interested in passerby NPCs. As a veteran player, he didn't mind being obsessed with female NPCs, but at the very least, they had to be ones he was familiar with and had strategies and developed. In the next few days, Gunan started to wander around. He even went to Lin Yunyun's hometown, try to find the trigger of the incident, but to no avail. Instead, he encountered a few waves of suicide attacks, mostly from Zhou Shuwen's disciples and grand disciples. They probably thought of themselves as warriors in novels and felt that they could enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. Unfortunately, in Gunan's eyes, their actions were no different from suicide. The military also sent a message, which was quite interesting. The letter came from Huang Wu, the mayor of the Star Domain Army. He was Huang Qi's uncle. Huang Qi was the one who had brought her younger brother to die in order to avenge Wei. Huang Wu's letter was very polite. The gist of it was that his nephew wasn't very smart, so kill him as you please. However, Hu Wei doted on her younger brother, so be careful. Just as Lan Marigold had expected, this mayor didn't value his nephew very much and wasn't willing to go against an eternal domain realm. He even wrote a letter to express his goodwill. After all, reality wasn't a novel. There were very few situations where the younger one was killed and the older one jumped out at any moment. Unless the other party felt that this was a mortal enemy, such as the 7-star squad, or Hu Wei. Gunan smiled and burned the letter, not taking it to heart at all. With his current strength, his survivability far exceeded his actual combat strength. He had long since reached a terrifying level. Even a level 4 player in the game would find it difficult to kill him unless their abilities were completely countered. The Shadow Evil God of Agility was one of the most difficult paths to kill, not to mention that he had chosen the blunting skill. Gunan's search was fruitless, so he had no choice but to try to dig it out from Lin Yunyan. Occasionally, he would study the origin of the girl's strange physique, as well as the specific characteristics of this physique. Sometimes, he would drug Lin Yunyan and send her to Gunyan. This kind of weird Yuri girl who liked little Lolas was obviously not a good person. It was normal for her to have a mission. Unfortunately, there were still no clues to the incident, even though he had a few more videotapes in his hands. On this day, Gunan, who was frustrated because of the incident, asked Lan Marigold out again. Of course, he didn't want to find someone to vent his anger on, but to see if she had any new tasks. You mean, the mission requires a medium-sized plane, regardless of the difficulty? Lan Marigold was puzzled by Gunan's strange request. Yes. Gunan nodded and said, "You don't need to know the reason. Just know the requirements." Lan Marigold shrugged and said, "It's rare to see a mission that would describe the size of the plane in advance, unless you're looking for a mission in a known plane. Is there a way?" Gunan asked with his hands crossed. If he could get this method, it would be fine even if he gave up on the serial case. He could get the reward anyway, and there were points in the instance dungeons. Lan Marigold frowned and thought for a moment. "It's not impossible, but I need a large number of missions to choose from. This requires a high level of authority on the reincarnation platform. Can I join the reincarnation platform directly?" Gunan asked, remembering his situation in the Mingyu. "Yes, but organizations like the Astral Gate won't accept people easily, especially not in a remote sector like the 9-star region." Gunan nodded. "Looks like it's time to change the map." Lan Marigold looked at him strangely. She didn't quite understand his words, but she still said, "I know of a small reincarnation organization that was established not long ago. Are you interested?" "Of course," Gunan said without hesitation. He couldn't wait to find a way to accept missions. Then he could find a mission directly. Lan Marigold finally smiled. "The organization is in the 6-star region. I can take you there. In exchange, do me a favor." "Okay." Gunan nodded. If he wanted to obtain information from an NPC, he had to complete the prerequisite mission. This was very much in line with the player's values. Lan Marigold began to talk about the matter. She needed Gunan to help her. To put it bluntly, they wanted him to be their fighter, to fight for the Liu clan once and win a battle. When it came to the interests of the branches of the Liu's family, it wasn't good for them to go against each other, so they used this method to decide. In reality, this was one of the reasons they came to the Red Carp in the first place. During the Hu Wei incident, Gunan didn't give his older sister, Lu Xinyu, any face at all, but she still came to him because of this. But as Gunan made more and more trouble, Lu Xinyu felt that she couldn't offer him anything that could move him, so she didn't bring it up again. "So when do we leave? Where's the location?" Gunan asked. "The sooner the better. Time is tight," Lan Marigold said. "The location is at 66 Amaterasu, our team's home field." Gunan was about to speak when the evil god's temple shook. Evil event triggered. Seize Max's eye. Gunan suddenly cursed in his heart. So the next event was triggered by Lan Marigold, or at 66 Amaterasu. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Gunan thought of his repeated probing these days and couldn't help but feel annoyed. It was a waste of time, but the clue finally appeared. He asked with concentration, "Have you heard of Max or Max's eye?" "Max," Lan Marigold thought for a while and finally shook her head. You're going to 66 Amaterasu? Gunyan stood in Gunan's room and asked with a frown. Yes, I'm going at the invitation of the Lu's family. Gunan put down the information in his hand and rubbed his eyebrows tiredly. He had been reading ancient books for 7 hours, from ancient times to modern times, all about 66 Amaterasu, and the name Max. There were many names or items that matched Max. He needed to compare them one by one to see which one could be the target of his mission. Gunyan didn't look too good, but she wasn't very disappointed. Care for One's family had spent most of its energy on the development of the plane recently and didn't care much about the astral realm. If Gunan, this unstable factor, was willing to leave on his own, it might not be a bad thing. But why are you taking Lin Yunyan away too? Gunyan's face was dark. This was what she really wanted to ask. Gunan couldn't help but smile. Why? Can't bear to part with her? His mocking tone made Gunyanji clench her teeth so hard that they made a cracking sound. Ever since her secret was discovered, she couldn't say anything in front of Gunan. Logically speaking, this secret wasn't a big deal at all, but her heart unconsciously softened a little. This high-quality version of Lan Marigold, even if she was unparalleled and astute, was still a girl in her 20s. Gunan stood up and patted her shoulder. I'm definitely taking Lin Yunyan away, but I can recommend you a new target. In that world, there's an older lowly called Yin Xiao Xiao. I'm sure she'll suit your taste. Gunyan stared at him for a while. Hesitation flashed across her face. Finally, she asked, how old? At least she's not young anymore. But her strength improved by leaps and bounds when she was young, and she still has the figure of a young girl. A legal lowly. Chapter 70. In the boundless sea of stars, a medium-sized but rather glamorous starship was slowly cruising. Inside the starship, Gunan was flipping through an ancient book under the pale yellow light. After a while, he took off his gold-rimmed glasses and rubbed his eyes tiredly. Then, he recorded something on a piece of paper beside him. Names of people, places, items. 352 clues related to Max, 41 of which can be related to the Eye of Max. After going through the ancient books and materials for a few days, Gunan finally sorted out the clues related to Max. As a professional player, whenever there was a clue related to a mission, Gunan didn't like to ask others to do it himself. It wasn't that he didn't have people he could use, nor was he a natural workaholic. It was just that he didn't trust other people's abilities. He always felt that it was easy to miss some important clues if he asked others to do it himself. But he wouldn't, to put it bluntly, he was narcissistic. Gu, Uncle Gu, the two Miss Lus are looking for you. Lin Yunyan's voice came from outside, but when she called him, she was obviously hesitant. As Lin Yunyan's adoptive father, Gunan decisively raised his seniority and flatly refused to be called brother. After failing to induce the little girl to call him dad, he finally called him uncle. When Gunan came to the outer room, the two sisters, Lu Xinyu and Lan Marigold, were already waiting there. Gunan and Lu Xinyu were brought onto the starship by Lan Marigold. At that time, Lu Xinyu was still looking for help outside, so today was the first time the two met after they parted ways. Come, call me sister, Gunan said to Lin Yunyan. Lin Yunyan greeted them obediently. Hello, Sister Luz. Hello. Lu Xinyu replied with a smile. She had a gentle temperament, and she especially liked little girls like Lin Yunyan. All right, you can go and play by yourself first. Okay, uncle. Lu Xinyu, no matter what, Mr. Gu is willing to lend a hand. Thank you so much. Although Lin Yunyan's address made her a little confused, the joy on Lu Xinyu's face was not fake. She had already heard about Gunan's achievements. Gunan's reputation in Red Carp wasn't very good, but Lu Xinyu wasn't a pedantic person. Lu's family was a real super aristocratic family, so it was impossible for their descendants to be too naive. Gunan smiled and said, You're welcome. This is just a transaction. Gunan would provide them with military force, and Lu's family would assist Gunan in finding the Eye of Max. This was the deal between the two parties. As the next clue to the series of events, the Eye of Max appeared when 66 Amaterasu was mentioned. Therefore, Gunan had reason to suspect that the clue was on 66 Amaterasu. As the key person in the incident, Lin Yunyun naturally had come along. Therefore, Sister Gunyan had to suffer and temporarily find Yin Xiaoxiao to solve her physiological needs. Gunan and Lu Xinyu chatted for a while. It was the latter who was basically thanking him, while Lan Marigold acted like a human statue and didn't take the initiative to speak at all. She knew that Gu Nen had always been a person who didn't hold back his words and wouldn't help her hide her identity. If she wasn't careful, she would be exposed. It's still 2 days to reach 66 Amaterasu. Gunan, why don't you come out for a walk? Lu Xinyu said with a smile. The scenery of the endless sea of stars can't be seen anywhere else. On the other side of the starship, a man and a woman from Lu's family were talking. This starship was privately owned by Lu's family. Other than Gunan and the others, there were also other children of the Luca clan and the helpers they invited. Cousin Huayun, I heard that you invited an interstellar hunter this time. The woman gently leaned on the railing of the deck and said with a smile. The woman's name was Lu Jing. She was from a relatively remote branch of Lu's family. This time, she was only here to join in the fun. The cousin Huayun she mentioned was one of the more famous children of Lu's family. He was also from 66 Amaterasu. Whether it was his connections or his own ability, he was quite good. Yes, a 5-star interstellar hunter. Lu Huayun didn't hide it and said with a smile. Lu Jing was stunned when she heard this. Then she exclaimed, 5-star? There aren't many in the entire 9-star field, right? Could it be? Lu Huayun waved his hand and said, don't guess blindly. It's Guan Shanxue, the disciple of Mr. Kong of Yin Yang Tower. He just reached 5-star 2 months ago. Oh, Lu Jing seemed a little disappointed, but she quickly became happy again. Guan Shanxue has been a transcendent for many years. Looks like Sister Xinyu will lose to you again, cousin. Lu Huayun's family had never been on good terms with Lan Marigold and her sister. Lu Jing said this to please them. Ha ha ha, the sisters have already gone to the red carp. What kind of powerful helpers can they find? Lu Huayun laughed heartily. True experts don't stay on administrative planets. They're all adventuring in the universe. There were countless relics and treasures in the universe, so it could attract top martial artists. Lu Huayun wasn't wrong. Lu Jing complimented him a few more times and suddenly said, Cousin Huayun, I heard that Zhang Yu brought a helper with her. That person even brought a little girl. Oh, Lu Huayun seemed to have heard something that interested him. He laughed loudly and said, Not bad. Xiao Jing, I, your cousin, will accept your kindness. A moment later, Gunan held Lin Yunyun's hand and walked slowly in the middle of the starship. Next to them was a transparent, floor-to-ceiling window that reflected the view of the universe outside. Lin Yunyun was only a 13-year-old girl. She had already rushed to the window and looked at the endless galaxy enviously. However, she looked like she had never seen the world. Of course, Lin Yunyun had never seen much of the world. Her actions attracted a burst of laughter from the people around her. Lin Yunyun was enjoying the view of the galaxy when she was startled by the laughter. She turned around and looked behind her. It turned out that the Starship restaurant was behind her. The original intention of this design was to let the customers in the restaurant see the stars when they lifted their heads. The girl looked at the customers' smiles and finally realized that her actions had been seen by them. She blushed instantly. On the other hand, Gunan and Lan Marigold didn't have any expression on their faces. Lan Marigold was shrewd and controlled her emotions well. As for Gunan, little sister, I think you should bring them to have a meal first. A magnetic voice sounded. It was a man's voice. He couldn't hide the smile in his voice. It's just the universe. There are plenty of opportunities to see it. The man in the silver suit lowered his head and said to Lin Yunyun, Little sister, don't you think so? His gaze was a little playful, causing Lin Yunyun's body to shrink. Lan Marigold stood at the side and smiled. Cousin Huayun, I advise you to put away your thoughts. There are some people you can't afford to offend. Oh, Lu Huayun narrowed his eyes and finally looked at Gunan. How should I address you, brother? However, Gunan ignored him. He was still looking at the starry sky outside the window. Lan Marigold smiled and said, This is Mr. Gunan. Lu Huayan frowned. He vaguely felt that the name was familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had heard it. Chapter 71. Uncle. Uncle. Gunan turned around and looked at her with confusion. What is it? Upon hearing that, Lu Huayan almost laughed out loud. He had taken Lan Marigold's warning seriously, but this person was even more of a country bumpkin. She was fascinated by the galaxy. As for the caution in his heart, he tossed it aside. Gunan was looking at the galaxy, but his thoughts were different from normal people's. With my body, I should be able to survive in a vacuum, right? Gunan thought to himself. In this world, break-world classes could travel through space. In the game, he had never encountered such a thing. His body was far more extraordinary than normal, so it should not be a problem. Still, he was not 100% sure. Gunan turned around and asked Lan Marigold, "How much strength do I need to break this glass window?" Lan Marigold was shocked. She had been on 70 or 80 ships before, but this was the first time someone had asked her that. Before she could answer, Lu Huayan laughed and said, "If you want to know, why don't you try it?" He coldly laughed. All the materials on the starship were made by the military. The floor-to-ceiling windows were the most important. What kind of a country bumpkin did this person come from? When Gunan heard that, he turned his head around. He looked at Lu Huayan calmly. It made Lu Huayan feel weird. That makes sense. Gunan sounded like he agreed. Before Lu Huayan could relax, he felt his head tighten. It was unknown when Gunan had appeared next to him. He grabbed his hair and pushed his head forward. He slammed it into the glass window. Dong! The dull sound echoed in the restaurant, and everyone in the restaurant was stunned. Gunan did not stop moving. He was still holding Lu Huayan's head. He used his head as a weapon and kept slamming it into the glass window. What was interesting was that there was no difference in the strength and angle of his every strike. The only thing that had changed was that after Lu Huayan's head had been hit repeatedly, his skull had fractured piece by piece. The shape of his skull had changed, which affected his strength. Dong! 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 The noise was still coming. Some people in the restaurant stood up, some cursed, and some even rushed over. Only Gunan continued to do as he pleased, until 30% strength, 25 times, Gunan said calmly as he threw Lu Huayan's badly mutilated face to the side. In front of him, a spiderweb-like crack had appeared on the special glass that isolated the inside from the outside. When this crack appeared in front of the crowd that was originally agitated instantly stopped in their tracks. None of them dared to approach Gunan. In the cafeteria of Starship, Lu Huayan had already been sent away for treatment. The crack caused by his head was surrounded by a dozen or so maintenance personnel who were sweating profusely as they repaired it. Mr. Gu, an old man in white, smiled bitterly and said helplessly. A white-robed old man smiled bitterly and said helplessly, "I hope you won't do such a dangerous thing in the future. This is irresponsible for your own life and disregards the safety of all the people on the ship." This old man was the captain of Starship. We heard that someone had smashed a crack on Starship. His hair almost turned white. He quickly brought a dozen or so people over. Fortunately, it did not cause a disaster. Faced with the captain's persuasion, Gunan's face remained expressionless. Perhaps he did not hear what the old man said because his gaze was still fixed on the crack. He had been paying attention to the repair of the crack. That's right. How can there be such a person? He actually beat up young Master Huayan to such a state. This person is a terrorist. Who the hell let him out? That's right. We request that he be chased off Starship. Otherwise, we won't go on this 66 Amaterasu. That's right. Voices began to spread among the onlookers, and they gradually turned into a common desire to kick Gunan out of the starship. Lu Xinyu had already arrived and was persuading them. Lan Marigold, on the other hand, had a nonchalant look on her face. This was despite the fact that the cause of all this might have been because of her words. Just as the clamor of the crowd was getting louder, a laughter came from afar. It showed how arrogant the person was and directly suppressed all the voices. Ha ha! How dare a bunch of trash like you talk nonsense in front of the Mad Warrior? The owner of the voice revealed himself. It was a handsome young man. He had an orange afro on his head, and he was dressed in a non-mainstream style. However, after he appeared, no one dared to make a sound. The reason was simple. This person's surname was Lu, and his name was Li. He had once wandered in the sea of stars alone for 7 years with a sword. After he returned, he became the #1 expert of a younger generation in Lu's family. This time, the Luca clan was fighting with other clansmen from other galaxies. The other branches had tried their best to find people to help, but only Li's branch remained unmoved. This was because he did not need to find anyone for help. He was a top-notch extraordinaire himself. After Li appeared, he did not look at Gunan and Lan Marigold. Instead, he shouted behind him, "Guan Shanxue, your master has been crippled. Why don't you dog come out and bark?" Seemingly forced by his words, the other white-haired young man had no choice but to show himself. This Guan Shanxue had a blank look on his face as he explained seriously, "Lu Huayun and I are friends. I was invited by him to help. I'm not responsible for his safety." The two young men appeared one after the other. Gunan's eyes scanned the two of them and revealed a playful expression. The two of them were at odds with each other, but their relationship seemed to be rather good. "But what do you mean by mad warrior?" Gunan interrupted their conversation and asked Li directly. Li withdrew his playful expression and said seriously, 2 days ago, the Central Star region released a new edition of the Stars ranking. You are ranked on it with the title Mad Warrior." As he spoke, he handed a piece of paper to Gunan. Gunan took the paper and realized that the material of the paper was special. It didn't look like an ordinary cloth. When he opened it, he saw the flickering stars and a list of names. At the very end of the paper, Gunan's name was written. Gunan, 19 years old. Member of the 9th Star Region's Red Carp. Origin unknown. Suspected to be a foreign visitor. Reason for entering the ranking. Within a few months of the modern world, his strength advanced from the Sciention realm to the Eternal Domain realm. The fastest breakthrough in the past century. Battle record. Solo battle with the 7-star squad in Red Carp. The latter was annihilated. Title. Because he used the blood-colored samurai sword during battle, he behaved like a mad demon. Hence, the title Mad Warrior. Innate ability, unknown. Special ability, unknown. Ability and ability are actually two unknown. It seems like there are times when Shanghai Pavilion doesn't live up to its name. It was unknown when Lan Marigold came over and saw the words on the paper. She chuckled and said, Li and Guan Shanxue didn't smile. Even a major force like Shanghai Pavilion couldn't find out about this person's background. There was only one possibility. Those who actually saw him in action were all dead. The two of them were willing to reveal themselves to meet this mad warrior because they wanted to interact with him and see if they could get more information. Gunan seemed to fulfill their wish and said, "Can you contact the person who released the list? There's a piece of information that needs to be corrected." "Oh, what is it?" Li's eyes lit up and quickly asked. Chapter 72. So what exactly is the Stars ranking? Gunan brought Lin Yunyun and sat opposite of Lan Marigold. He picked up the coffee that the waiter served and asked. Lan Marigold revealed a rare, solemn expression. Don't underestimate the Stars ranking. This is the signature of the Central Star region's super organization, Shanghai Pavilion. "Give me some more sugar. Thank you," Gunan said to the waiter. Bang! Lan Marigold slammed the table in anger, causing the coffee cups on the table to shake. Lin Yunyun lowered her head and her shoulders were shaking, as though she was holding it in. After taking a few deep breaths, Lan Marigold finally adjusted her emotions. Even though she had previously ridiculed them, as a reincarnator, her reverence for an organization like Shanghai Pavilion was deep in her bones. It was a pity that her reverence wasn't something that Gunan could experience. To the players, there were only two types of NPC factions, those that could be flattened and those that could be flattened in the future. But after Lan Marigold's introduction, Gunan finally understood the meaning of the Stars ranking. As the core strength of the Star Sea, Transcendence usually had a lot of privileges and would receive a lot of attention. The Stars ranking was a ranking specially created for Transcendence. Because of its authority, it was very popular among martial artists. After all, in this world, Fame and fortune were what people sought in life. The stars ranking represented the top half. In order to be on the stars ranking, apart from the hard condition of advancing into the transcendence realm, it was also based on one's ability and achievements, and not solely on one's cultivation level. There were transcendents of all cultivation levels on the stars ranking. There were even quite a number of chaotic primes, but most of them had their own trump cards and weren't easy to deal with. Only those with outstanding abilities would be able to be on the stars ranking. The stars ranking only recorded the experts who were still alive and whose strength was at the transcendental stage. Including Gunan, who was recently listed, there were only 461 names. These 461 people represented the most powerful transcendence in the entire astral realm. To be able to make it onto the stars ranking in a remote region like the 9-star region wasn't a small matter. It was no wonder that Lu Li and Guan Shanxue valued Gunan so much. After parting ways with Lan Marigold, Gunan brought Lin Yinyan back to his room. Not long after, an unexpected visitor came to visit. Young Master Lu? What a rare guest. Gunan looked at Lu Li, who had been waiting here for an unknown amount of time. Lu Li smiled and said, "Just call me Lu Li. I've long heard about Mr. Gu from my younger brother. It's really better to meet him in person than to hear about him." Oh. Before Gunan could think further, Lu Li took the initiative and said, "My younger brother is called Lu Wu." So it's him. Gunan recalled that taciturn but abnormally sensitive youth. He might not know why he was in the red carp, but he was definitely not an ordinary person. He didn't expect this person to be more important than he had imagined. He then recalled that Lan Marigold specially came over and asked him to take care of Lu Wu. It seemed like she expected him to be suspicious and did it on purpose. This woman really didn't want to let go of any opportunity and wanted to find trouble for him. Gunan's mind was spinning, but he didn't show it on his face. "Young Master Lu is looking for me?" Lu Li spoke with an expressionless face. "Mr. Gu, do you know that there are people in the 66 Amaterasu who have laid out an inescapable net and are just waiting for you to step on it?" So, Gunan raised his brows and had the same expressionless face. Gunan's attitude made Lu Li seem to have understood something. His face revealed a cold intent. "It seems like Mr. Gu is very confident of your strength. I would like to remind you that that person has invited someone from the stars ranking to make a move." Gunan didn't say anything else and simply shook his head. He then led Lin Yinyan into the room and closed the door. He never liked to explain to others. Lu Li let out a sneer and, similarly, turned to leave. There was already someone waiting for him at the corner. It was actually Guan Shanxue who appeared earlier. What did he say? He didn't even ask who was going to deal with him. Lu Li's face revealed a disdainful expression, an arrogant lunatic. Hu Wei will let him know the price of arrogance. The incident on Starship didn't have much of an impact. Lu Huayun might have an extraordinary status in Lu's family, but he still couldn't be compared to someone like Lu Li. After Lu Li personally paid a visit to Gunan, everyone understood Lu's family's attitude towards Gunan, even though their conversation wasn't pleasant. When the news of Gunan ascending the stars ranking got out, his reputation was truly resounding. Half of the 9-star region had heard of him as the fastest breakthrough in 100 years. 2 days passed by quickly. Gunan was able to leave Starship and step onto the famous 66 Amaterasu. If Red Carp was a typical modern city, then the city of 66 Amaterasu was more like a steel jungle. There aren't many residential areas in 66 Amaterasu. Hence, the city's utilization rate is very high. Lan Marigold acted as a temporary tour guide and explained to Gunan and Lu Huayun. "Even the air is being used?" Gunan said softly as he looked at the various, strangely shaped buildings in the air. "That's right. Those are all residences." Lan Marigold shrugged her shoulders and said, "So you should understand that the ground level that you're staying in is very expensive. In this high martial arts world, it was rather dangerous to stay in the sky. Because you don't know, maybe one day, 2 people will appear and break through the wall of your house." Gunan was a distinguished guest of Lu's family, which was why he was able to stay in the extremely precious ground-level residences. Of course, Gunan didn't really care about this. With his current physique, Even if he was thrown down from 1,000 meters in the sky, he could still stand up. Is there any news on the information that I asked you to investigate? Gunan asked. He was referring to the information regarding the word Max that he had previously given to Land Marigold. We're still investigating. So far, we haven't found any valuable clues, Land Marigold said. Gunan nodded. After all, he had just arrived at 66 Amaterasu not long ago. The people of Lu's family wouldn't be so fast in their actions. Asking the people of Lu's family to help him investigate was something that he had planned for a long time. He was different from those who had clues but insisted on investigating by themselves. This kind of mechanical and unskilled work was not something that a professional player would do. He wasn't afraid of anyone who dared to take his things. If there was such a person, he would just kill them and get his things back. All right. Land Marigold looked at Gunan strangely and said, on the side of the immortal and demon world, Gunyin and Yin Xiao are fighting. Long before the two of them left the Red Carp, Gunan had asked Land Marigold to arrange people to go to the immortal and demon world before they were reincarnated as their informants. Of course, Gunan wasn't stupid enough to really hand over the immortal and demon world to care for one's family. At this time, when Gunan heard this, he wasn't surprised at all. Instead, he laughed out loud. Good. Let your people start spreading rumors. Just say that those outsiders from care for one's family want to destroy the immortal and demon world. Chapter 73. The situation in the immortal and demon world was actually under Gunan's control. He was limited by his transcended soul and could not monitor it personally, but he could find others to reincarnate over and collect information for him. Reincarnation was really an excellent investigative method, safe, efficient, and there was no fear of the collected information not being able to be transmitted. Since Care for One's family knew about the immortal and demon world, they adopted the most correct method, which was to cooperate with the local forces and carry out their invasion and colonization plan. Although the power of the astral world was far greater than that of the immortal and demon world, reincarnators had to return regularly, so they had to support the local forces. And because of Gunan's legacy, Blue Dragon Hall became the best choice. Originally, everything was going on in an orderly manner. Even Land Marigold had given up on the idea of joining in, but she did not expect that there would suddenly be a change. Care for One's family had previously supported Blue Dragon Hall and continued to suppress other forces. Now that Blue Dragon Hall has fallen out with them, both sides are really like fire and water. As Land Marigold spoke, her expression became more and more strange, and she asked curiously, "How did you do it?" Gunyin and Yin Xiao don't seem like people who act impulsively. In her opinion, the cooperation between Yin Xiao and Care for One's family was completely beneficial for both sides. Care for One's family would share the resources of the immortal and demon world, while Blue Dragon Hall would obtain power and support and could truly control a part of the world and enjoy great power. Gunan just smiled and did not say anything, of course. He could not explain the reason. In terms of personal orientation, it was probably Gunyin's only weakness. On one hand, she could not suppress the desire in her heart, and on the other hand, she desperately wanted to hide it. So after the conflict broke out, she chose to fall out without saying anything. As for Yin Xiao, it was even simpler. I treat you as a sister, and you actually want to have sex with me? Gunan was unwilling to explain further. Land Marigold left with her heart full of doubts. Lin Yinyin walked over and handed Gunan a cup of coffee, and the latter added 3 bags of sugar. Did anything special happen when you were practicing martial arts recently? Gunan asked the little loli to sit down and asked with a faint smile. Lin Yinyin stared blankly at the 3 empty sugar bags and mumbled, I don't feel anything. The innate realm seems to be just like this. That's right. Lin Yinyin had successfully entered the innate realm in the past few days. But because her body's true qi was too abundant, there was no essential difference between innate true qi and acquired true qi. At most, she could use more true qi. Gunan reached out and patted her arm, causing her to cry out in pain. The true qi in your body doesn't seem to be accumulating anymore. Gunan said, the higher your realm, the better your control of true qi, the less pain you will feel. Lin Yunyun's eyes suddenly lit up when she heard this. Then in the future, can I never feel pain? Theoretically, yes. Gunan nodded and then took out a bag of white powder. Now, let's eat first. Lin Yunyun glared at him bitterly, then quickly snatched the powder, squatted in the corner, and ate crazily. She still maintained her previous habit of using a rather inelegant posture every time she ate, even though she could slowly enjoy it now. Soon, the room was only left with Gunan's not heavy breathing and the girl's weak moans after eating. 66 Amaterasu. In a simple, independent house, a white-haired old man with a youthful face was sipping tea. His eyes fell on the distance where others couldn't see, and he sighed softly. In that case, that Mr. Gu doesn't have the intention to reconcile. The old man's voice was very calm, and not much emotion could be heard. Yes. Luli stood in front of the old man and said in a deep voice, "Grandfather, should we help Hu Wei?" This old man was Lu Li's grandfather, the true ruler of the Luca clan, Lu Yiming, who was also known as the Spirit Elder. Lu Yiming had been overseeing 66 Amaterasu for dozens of years, and he almost single-handedly created this planet of steel. It was evident that he had an iron fist, but at this moment, he gently waved his hand. After the stars ranking was released, Su Yuanjun specially looked for me and said that this Gu Nin isn't a good person. If Xiao Wei wants to take revenge, my Lu family won't interfere. Luli frowned slightly. There were two ways to understand not a good person. One was that this person's personality wasn't easy to get along with, and the other was his strength wasn't easy to deal with. He admitted that this person was able to ascend the stars ranking at such a young age, and he definitely wasn't someone easy to deal with. But this was still 66 Amaterasu. Back when his grandfather was expanding the territory, he was also a member of the stars ranking, and he had fallen before. To this day, there were at least 3 eternal domain realm experts hidden here. As compared to the Red Carp, which was the main star of the star region, 66 Amaterasu was closer to the front lines, and there were more experts coming and going. Grandfather, Su Yuanjun hasn't made a move for so many years. Could it be that his strength has regressed, and he has underestimated his opponent? Luli frowned and said, "Regressed." Lu Yiming couldn't help but laugh. "You little rascal. When old Su obtained the title, your father was still drinking milk. What did I say just now? Old Su specially came to look for me." This old man who was laughing loudly emphasized, "Specially, do you understand? He came personally." Personally? So what? Luli wasn't able to react for a moment, and he was shocked at the next moment. His grandfather said, after the stars ranking was released, during these 2 days, there wasn't a second starship that took this star path. In other words, Su Yuanjun relied on his own strength to directly travel to 66 Amaterasu. The youth couldn't help but take a deep breath. Is this the power of space? On the steel planet 66 Amaterasu, the most common thing was man-made buildings, and it was a city made of reinforced concrete. The rarest thing was undoubtedly the unmodified natural scenery. There was such a place in the vicinity of Lu's family's residence. This was a secluded valley, and the crisp chirping of birds echoed in the mountains, giving off an indescribable feeling of tranquility. A green-clothed man was walking in the valley, and his pace wasn't fast or slow. He seemed to be admiring the scenery along the way, but his eyes were always looking ahead. There was a waterfall in front of him, and it was a super large waterfall that had a height of 1,000 meters. The splashing water could even land in front of the man. That person has arrived. I wonder when will Xiao Wei come out of seclusion? The man looked at the waterfall for a moment and let out a helpless sigh. Before he could finish his sentence, he saw a mystical scene in front of the waterfall. The curtain of water that was flowing down slowly opened up, as though it was forcefully separated by some kind of force. Bit by bit, the water was blocked to both sides, revealing a figure behind the water. That figure was wearing a simple military uniform, and there were traces of fatigue in between his brows, but his eyes were bright and full of expression. If there was someone familiar here, they would definitely be able to recognize this person. It was Ue, who had disappeared for a long time. Chapter 74. In 66 Amaterasu, in a mausoleum behind an old residence, a group of black-clothed men surrounded a tombstone, led by a white-clothed young man. The young man was expressionless as he uttered, "Dig." The group of black-clothed men did not hesitate at all, and immediately began to dig. They would have hesitated at first, but they had done similar things countless times over the past few days and had long become numb to it. After a short while, a coffin was placed in front of them. The young man waved his hand, and a pitch-black blade of light flew out, directly splitting open the coffin, revealing the skeleton inside. The young man dispersed the dust that pervaded the air and searched the coffin for a while, then shook his head and said, "Let's go to the next place." Outside the mausoleum, there was already a scene of mountains of corpses and seas of blood, with corpses lying everywhere. When the white-clothed young man walked out, he completely ignored all of this. There was still a man on the ground who had not died yet, and he used the last of his strength to climb up, glaring fiercely at the young man. "Why, my family has no enmity with you. Why did you slaughter my kin, burn my—" Before he could finish speaking, a black light flashed, and the man's head had already fallen. The young man slowly melted the black sword in his hand, and did not even stop moving forward. Not letting the last hit affect one's movements, this was the advantage that professional players had over ordinary players. When the black-clothed man behind saw this scene, he sighed softly and said, "If you want to blame someone, blame it on your ancestor. There's someone called Max, sir. The last 12 clues have all been explored today." The leader of the black-clothed men, or rather the Liu family who had changed their appearances, stood in front of Gunan and carefully reported. It was not that this leader was weak, but the methods that the person in front of them had displayed over the past few days were too cruel and ruthless, and even these people found it a little difficult to bear. The white-clothed young man was naturally Gunan. He nodded, indicating for the leader to lead his men away, and then sat in the mansion that Liu family had prepared, feeling helpless. It had been 4 days since he arrived at 66 Amaterasu. After comparing the clues he collected with the information collected by Liu's family, he finally determined that there were 44 valuable clues. Gunan had locked the name Max on ancient heroes, fierce beasts, and vicious birds. The 44 clues all revolve around such things. But in the end, Gunan was wrong. Could it be a living person or a place name? Gunan was most afraid of these two situations. There were too many variables in the former. If he was not a local resident, he would not have registered his name in the register. How was he supposed to start looking? As for the latter, information was too difficult to find. Many names had been submerged in the torrent of history, and no one knew of them now. Uncle Lin Yunyun had unknowingly walked to his side and said softly, "I received something today." Gunan turned around in confusion and saw Lin Yunyun holding a small box in her hand. The box was pink, and it looked very girlish. Gunan did not think too much about it. He opened the box and found a small piece of paper inside. There were some pink crystals wrapped in the paper. There was a small line of words on the paper: military stimulant drug. Max, in the quiet valley, Ue and a man walked side by side. The man's face was full of excitement. "Xiao Wei, you succeeded in advancing this time, and your strength has increased by leaps and bounds. You can definitely take revenge." Ue shook her head lightly. "Although my psychokinesis is special, it can at most compete with someone in the nuance realm. That person has already formed his domain. It's not easy to deal with him." The man was stunned. Although he also knew martial arts, his mind was not on it. This man, named Tian Yuequan, was only an acquired martial artist. Naturally, he did not know the difference between extraordinaires. Hui did not say much and continued to walk forward. But soon she stopped. At the entrance of the valley, there was an old man standing there. "Teacher," Hui opened her mouth with some difficulty. Her originally resolute gaze was somewhat lowered. She knew she was determined to avenge her little brother. She had let her teacher down. Her foundation was not stable, and she leveled up early. She had cut off her path to break the world. She had failed her teacher's teachings. She was determined to fight Gunan, and her teacher's family was in danger. After all, Gunan had been invited by Lan Marigold to help Lu's family, but the enemy had come to her home base. How could she let him go? Lu Yiming looked at the student he was so proud of. After a while, he sighed and said, "This battle is your destiny. I will not help either of you. Our relationship as teacher and student ends here. Take care of yourself." After saying that, Lu Yiming's body disappeared. He did not give Hu Wei a chance to speak again. Hu Wei was frozen as she watched her teacher leave. She could not come back to her senses for a while. Tian Yue Quan was frozen. After a while, he said, "Old Lu, why is he suddenly so cruel?" Hu Wei's eyes focused again. She took a deep breath and said, "Teacher is reminding me. He does not think I can win. Maybe the enemy is so strong that he has to worry about it. He does not want to risk the entire Lu's family." Her words made Tian Yuequan speechless for a while. At that moment, another shadow appeared next to the two of them. The person was wearing a black bamboo hat. He had the face of a middle-aged man. He looked very sad. Tian Yuequan saw the man and quickly bowed. "Greetings, Mr. Yi. I am Yuquan." The middle-aged man nodded and had a smile in his eyes. However, his face was still sad. "So you are the young lad from the Tian's family. You were only this tall when I came to 66 Amaterasu." As Mr. Yi spoke, he gestured at his knees. Tian Yuequan looked embarrassed. He let out 2 dry coughs and didn't dare to say anything else. Hu Wei's expression turned even uglier. "Mr. Yi, even you are here to advise me to give up on my revenge?" "Yes." Mr. Yi nodded slowly. Gu Nin is already on the stars ranking. He is titled as the Mad Warrior. He paused for a moment and felt that it was cruel to tell this news to Hu Wei, a 19-year-old titled warrior. Hu Wei had been in seclusion and had just heard this news. Her expression turned dark, and she was speechless. "Even you aren't confident?" Hu Wei looked at Mr. Yi. She didn't wish to hear an answer from him. She still couldn't believe that no matter how talented that Gunan was, could he be a match for the man in front of her? He had progressed to the Eternal Domain realm 20 years ago and was titled as the Bitter Sword Saint 10 years ago. He had been dominating the Star Sea for dozens of years. How could he be incomparable to that fellow who had just debuted for a few months? She was disappointed when the Bitter Sword Saint, Yi Qinglan, ultimately shook his head. The Stars ranking doesn't have a ranking. Everyone on the Stars ranking is an outstanding talent. No one knows what kind of trump cards they have. Yi Qinglan said calmly, "I am not afraid of that Gunan, but I am not 100% confident that I can make him stay." Yi Qinglan's follow-up explanation made Hu Wei feel more at ease. It wasn't that Mr. Yi thought that he wouldn't be a match for his opponent, but his goal this time was to kill someone, which made the difficulty much higher. It wasn't easy to kill a titled expert, but it was even more difficult to make him stay. "But you don't have to worry," he said to Hu Wei. "Since I promised your father to help me once, I will do my best this time." Hu Wei could only say a few words of thanks and didn't say anything else. Soon enough, Yi Qinglan left. "Shao Wei." Tian Yuequan looked at her dazed expression and couldn't help but say, "Why not? I get my family to help and ruin this Gunan's reputation." The Tian's family was a famous political family in the 66 Amaterasu. Tian Yuequan was most familiar with the methods of accumulating and destroying one's reputation. Hu Wei shook her head, but her eyes gradually turned resolute, as though she had made a decision. She walked out of the valley on her own. Chapter 75. At the Tian's family. "Dad, you have to help me this time." Tian Yuequan stood in front of his father's desk with a stern expression, as though he was going to die if his father didn't agree. Tian Tianrong looked at his only son helplessly and didn't know what to say. "How can I help? Is it something we can interfere in the battle between 2 stars rankers?" Tian Tianrong slammed on the table and had an expression of exasperation. Back then, he didn't agree for the clan to leave the military and enter the political arena, causing the younger generation to be unwilling to learn martial arts. Why didn't they understand that strength was the one that spoke in this world? Tian Yuequan didn't even dare to raise his head after being reprimanded, but his mouth still said, "Dad, you are the capital's chairman, and you don't need us to fight. We just have to say a few words." Tian Tianrong was so angry that he laughed. Just a few words from me can make 2 stars rankers listen to me? Am I the chairman of the entire federation or something? Why don't they listen? Tian Yuequan spoke with justice. As long as Dad says it and allows Gunan to have a fair fight with Mr. Yi, he will still have to give you some face, right? A fair fight? That's right. Mr. Yi said it himself. He isn't afraid of not being able to defeat his opponent, but he isn't confident that he can make him stay. Tian Yuequan repeated what he heard from Yi Qinglan today. Tian Tianrong's expression gradually calmed down as he considered the pros and cons of this matter. If he just invited both parties to a fight, even if it wasn't successful, there wouldn't be any losses. But if it was successful, a name suddenly popped up in Tian Tianrong's mind. Hu Wei. Perhaps this was the opportunity for the Tian's family to return to the military. As for how to entice Gu Nan to take the bait, it was obviously impossible to rely on words like his son. Tian Tianrong wasn't foolish enough to think that he could make a star's ranker give him face. He lowered his head and took out a note from the drawer. 2 words were written on it. Max. All the information about the stimulant Max is here. Lan Marigold sat in the dim light, moved a large stack of documents, and said at the same time. Gunan didn't say anything and continued to read. Lan Marigold continued. Max, a stimulant used by the military to boost one's spirit. It also has the effect of dispersing chaotic internal energy. It was first contributed by the Tian's family to the military as the price for them to fully withdraw from the military and devote themselves to politics. Later, because the drug was too hallucinogenic, its use was abolished. Which Tian's family? Gunan raised his eyebrows as if he had understood something. Land Marigold pointed at the table seriously. It's this Tian's family. On the table was an invitation letter. It was from the parliament speaker of 66 Amaterasu's capital city, Tian Tianrong. He represented the bitter sword saint, Yi Qinglan, to invite Gu Nan for a public duel. The prize was the method to produce the drug Max. This is obviously a trap set up by someone. Lan Marigold sat opposite Gu Nan and spoke with a serious expression. Yi Qinglan and Hu Wei's father are good friends. How do the Tian's family know that you need this drug Max? Even though Lu's family had been searching for Max with great fanfare, even Gu Nan had just found out that Max might be referring to a drug. How do the Tian's family know about it in advance? This is an open scheme. Gu Nan knocked on the table lightly and let out a faint smile. No matter who is the mastermind, if he knows, I will definitely go. Lan Marigold couldn't help but roll her eyes and said, the Bittersword Saint was at the Eternal Domain realm 20 years ago. How confident are you? Of course, 100%. Gu Nan laughed and said, I am not going to fight to the death with him. I'm just going to claim the prize. A grand announcement of the duel had unfolded with both parties tacitly agreeing to it. No one knew where the news first came from, and no one knew who the source was. But the news of the Bittersword Saint, Yi Qinglan's return to Mother Planet, Tian Yi, and his duel with the newly advanced star's ranker, Gu Nan, had already spread like wildfire. In just 2 days, almost the entire 66 Amaterasu knew what the star's ranker was, who the star's ranker was, who Gu Nan and Yi Qinglan were, and they were going to duel. On the day of the duel, at the back of the duel arena, the Bittersword Saint, Yi Qinglan, had been waiting for a long time. At a certain moment, he slowly opened his eyes, and a figure gradually appeared beside him. You have taken the military's medicine. Yi Qinglan looked at the person beside him and spoke with an expressionless face. The person beside him was Hu Wei, but the current Hu Wei had snow-white hair that reached her waist, which was completely different from her previous short hair. Half a day. Hu Wei's voice seemed to be trembling slightly. I only have half a day. If you are unable to kill him, I will make my move. When she was speaking, Hu Wei's eyes were fixed on the other party. The Bittersword Saint had always been a loner and had never teamed up with anyone. Would this time be an exception? Yi Qinglan remained silent for a long time and finally nodded gently before walking towards the duel arena alone. At the end of the passageway, the sunlight gradually shone on the middle-aged sword saint's body, followed by a tsunami of voices. The clamor and clamor couldn't affect his state of mind. This was the concentration that an Eternal Domain realm expert would have when facing a life and death battle. The duel arena was filled with spectators. Due to the government's vigorous publicity, countless societal celebrities and tyrannical martial artists had gathered here today, looking forward to the duel between the two experts. A reporter and commentator at the front was currently reporting with spittle flying everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Tianyi television station's frontline reporter. We are now at the Capitol's Plaza, which is also the duel arena for the two stars rankers, Mr. Yi Qinglan and Mr. Gunan. This duel between the two of them can be said to be the duel of the century that is rarely seen in 100 years. The government has even sponsored the manufacturing method of the secret medicine Max as a wager for both sides. The duel is about to begin. We can see that the sword Dao master, Mr. Yi Qinglan, is already in position. He is indeed worthy of being a master of the generation. Just his posture alone is enough to give people immense pressure. In the VIP seats, Tian Tianrong was sitting in the middle with a calm expression. No one could tell what he was thinking. His only son, Tian Yuequan, was standing behind him. His face was obviously revealing excitement, and he couldn't help but look in a certain direction. Mr. Yi came out from that direction, so Xiao Wei must be there too. Xiao Wei, did you see that? I can help you with that too. Speaker Tian, you truly have a good method. Lu Li sat beside Tian Tianrong and revealed a rather profound smile. He spoke in a low voice. For such a scene, the investment must not be small, right? He was here to represent Lu's family. If Lu Yiming didn't show up, Lu Li was qualified to represent Lu's family's attitude. Tian Tianrong's expression didn't change. He smiled faintly and waved his hand. I don't deserve it. I heard that this Mr. Gu's temper isn't that good. I am just trying to protect myself. Lu Li grunted lightly and didn't say anything else. This Tian Tianrong was indeed smart to make such a big scene. Even if Gunan wasn't satisfied with this duel, he couldn't possibly show it in public, right? This was the 66 Amaterasu and not Gunan's territory. At the same time, the commentator's voice echoed again. Ladies and gentlemen, the one walking towards us is the other star's list expert of the duel. He is from the red car, Mr. Gunan. No wonder he is a young hero. Mr. Gu's majestic strides have already reached the duel stage. Mr. Gu made a turn. Is he trying to greet Master Yi first? Chapter 76. The Capital Square was the venue chosen by the government for the duel between Gunan and Tian Tianrong. It was often used for public performances. The whole place was like a basin, surrounded by audience seats that were constantly rising. Such an arrangement allowed everyone in the audience to see the scene below clearly. The VIP seats were placed at the lower end of the audience seats. It was an excellent position, but it was also the position closest to the square. What was on the VIP seats? There were Tian Tianrong and other VIPs, as well as the commentator and the prize. In order to show their sincerity, the Tian's family had already prepared the prize. Now it was placed in the center of the VIP seats, which was also a display for all the audience to see. At this time, Gunan was standing in front of the prize. Max. So that's what it means. When Gunan saw the so-called prize, he couldn't help but smile. It was a beautifully carved golden eagle. Its whole body was bright gold, and only its left eye was blood red. At first glance, it was a bit strange. Gunan clearly saw that on the back of this little eagle, there was clearly a line of small words engraved. It was written in some kind of ancient language. Although he didn't understand it, Gunan could guess what it was. It was Max, and its eyes were Max's eyes. Mr. Gu, please return to the field immediately. The duel is about to begin. A tall man walked over and said stiffly. This man wore a police uniform, and as he watched Gunan's actions, he said in a low voice, If you can win the duel, the prize will naturally be yours. Could it be that you want to disregard the dignity of a martial artist? Gunan stretched out one hand, which had already fallen on the golden eagle Max, while the other hand gently waved. Slap! A slap landed on the man's face, and the terrifying force twisted his neck instantly. His whole head rotated twice in a row, and then slowly fell down. Gunan didn't even look at him. He calmly put away the golden eagle. When his finger brushed over the left eye of the golden eagle, an inexplicable throbbing seemed to come from it, but it was instantly crushed by the body of the evil god. Seems like something ran out? Gunan looked down in confusion. Unfortunately, it's too weak. The fall of the police uniform seemed to make the surrounding people speechless. Luli's expression was a bit ugly, and Tian Tianrong even looked a bit panicked. What made him even more panicked was that his son actually spoke at this time. Gunan, you dare to kill people in public? Do you have any respect for the Federation law? Tian Tianrong said with a sigh. He felt as if he was going to explode out. The speaker's son was still trying to restrict Gunan with the rules. Tian Tianrong said, Tian God Gu Gunan and Shun and Nan Tian Tianrong. Is the incident not over yet? He touched his chin and looked at Tian Yuequan in front of him. Is it because an NPC participated in the fight, so the incident is not over yet? Seeing that Gu Nan didn't reply, Tian Yuequan calmed down. No matter how arrogant he was, he didn't dare to be presumptuous in front of so many people. Put down the things and turn yourself in at the police station with me. You can still clang. Before Tian Yuequan could finish, he felt a gust of cold wind in front of him. Then he heard the sound of metal colliding, which hurt his eardrums. When he looked up again, he saw that Yi Qinglan was standing in front of him with a small black sword under his feet. Mr. Gu, he has no enmity with you. Don't you think it's ungentlemanly of you to kill him just because of a quarrel? Yi Qinglan said calmly, still looking distressed. Only now did Tian Yuequan realize what had happened, and a trace of cold sweat seeped out from his back as he pointed at Gunan while trembling. You're a homicidal maniac. Be careful, Yi Qinglan shouted. Before he could do anything, a black sword pierced through Tian Yuequan's back and pierced his heart. Yi Qinglan was a swordsman. He wasn't good at protecting people. So, when his reputation couldn't scare the other party, Tian Yuequan would definitely die. Son! A cry of grief came from afar. Tian Tianrong hadn't recovered from the shock. He knelt on the ground, his face full of grief and anger. Gunan! The chairman spat out Gunan's name from his clenched teeth. You go against the law and treat human life like grass. Before he could finish his sentence, Gunan's sword had arrived. Yi Qinglan's expression changed. He knew that he wouldn't be able to rescue Tian Yuequan. He might as well thrust his sword at Gunan's waist. He was planning to besiege Tian Yuequan to rescue Tian Yuequan. He believed that even if Tian Yuequan was a stars ranking expert, he wouldn't be able to ignore it. Yi Qinglan's sword pierced Gunan without any obstruction. But this bitter sword saint immediately felt a repulsive force coming from Tian Yuequan's body. His sword was actually unable to penetrate any deeper. Tian Tianrong's voice stopped abruptly. Gunan paid the price of getting stabbed and forcefully pierced his throat, taking his life. Everything happened too quickly. The VIP seats and the surrounding audience only reacted at this moment. There was an uproar and the crowd was in an uproar. The death of the Tian family's father and son, and Gunan's action of disregarding the duel and taking the prize had completely infuriated the crowd. Chairman Tian is dead? How is this possible? Thug. This is a thug. The Red Carp's men actually came to our 66 Amaterasu to kill people. This is too much. Sword Saint Yi, you must teach this bastard a lesson. The crowd clamor didn't affect Yi Qinglan. He had a grave expression and thrust his sword at Gunan's chest again. This time, the speed was faster than before. But this time, Gunan suddenly turned around. A blood-colored long saber appeared in his hand, and he slashed down. Yi Qinglan, who was alarmed, immediately retreated. He couldn't be bothered to attack anymore. At the same time, he raised his hand and placed his sword horizontally, trying to block Gunan's attack. Something that he didn't expect happened. The blood-colored long saber slashed on the long sword. It didn't even pause for a moment. It directly cut through the sword and fell straight down. Yi Qinglan couldn't dodge in time. He could only move sideways. The blood-colored saber instantly cut off his left arm. At the same time, under the robe that others couldn't see, there was another wound on Gunan's left shoulder. But it quickly began to heal. The scene at the VIP seats was being played by the projection crystal. It was projected on the big screen for all the audience to see. Therefore, they were all speechless. Bittersword Saint. Yi Qinglan actually had his long sword and left hand cut off in one move. Even Lu Li, who was at the side, was dumbfounded. He knew that Gunan was strong, but he didn't think he would be this strong, right? Chapter 77. Lu Li was Lu's family's top prodigy. He himself was a transcendent in the nuance realm, so his judgment was far better than that of ordinary people. After the initial shock, he quickly realized what the problem was. That saber. Lu Li stared at Gunan's blood-red saber, unable to calm down for a long time. If his guess was correct, the saber's sharpness had reached an unimaginable level. Yi Qinglan's sword, regardless of its material, had been nurtured by his sword heart for decades. It was already a famous sword in the world. However, such a sword had been cut in half. This was what Yi Qinglan had not expected, and what had caused his arm to be cut off. He looked at Yi Qinglan's expression. His eyes were filled with confusion, shock, and indignation. It was as if he could empathize with Yi Qinglan. The great Bittersword Saint had not lost to his opponent, but to his saber. Thinking of this, Lu Li seemed to have an evil fire in his heart. He couldn't help but blurt out, "Gunan, you won by relying on your weapon. What kind of hero are you?" As soon as he said that, Lu Li saw Gunan turn around and smile cruelly at him. The next moment, Gunan's figure appeared in front of him, and he swung his saber down so fast. That was the thought in Lu Li's mind. His body was already madly activating his inner breath and his transcendent power. He knew all too well that he would not be able to withstand such a strike. Just as the blood-red saber was about to land on him, Lu Li's body trembled slightly. He turned into a piece of dead wood, and his body appeared next to him. At the transcendent stage, especially after the nuance realm, most martial artists would have all sorts of strange powers, as well as some strange life-saving techniques. With substitution technique, Gunan's vision was very high. Before Lu Li could be complacent, he had already revealed his background. The corner of Lu Li's mouth twitched. Before he could speak, a figure slowly appeared behind Gunan. The appearance of this figure was too inexplicable. Even Gunan did not notice it. It was like a ghost, waiting for Gunan to finish his saber strike and appear when his mind was at its most relaxed. Die! A deep and cold roar sounded. Gunan felt a chill on the back of his neck as a heavy blow landed on him. This figure was none other than Hu Wei. At this moment, not only was her hair snow white, even her skin was a strange white. She looked like a snow demon from a ghost story. She hit Gunan with a ball of psychic energy that was condensed to the extreme and filled with the power of frost. Gunan was sent flying and crashed into the wall at the side. He only stopped after crashing through 3 walls. Lu Li leaned to the side, still looking fearful. He looked at Hu Wei with a strange gaze. He knew what Hu Wei had taken. It was a forbidden drug in the military. It was only effective on extraordinaires and could inject highly compressed energy into the user. However, the side effects of this drug were very serious, and the process of taking it was extremely painful. He did not expect this woman to go to this extent for her brother. However, if Gunan was hit head-on, and it was a vital point like his neck, he probably would not have a chance to survive. To put it bluntly, that drug was a highly compressed energy ball. It was equivalent to the inner breath of 10 extraordinaires. If it hit a person directly, no one would be able to withstand it. Yi Qinglan had just stopped the bleeding from his wound. Holding his broken sword, he slowly walked to Hu Wei and sighed. After this attack, you only have 5 years left to live at most. Is it worth it? Of course it's worth it. Hu Wei trembled a little, but her eyes were still firm. He dared to kill my brother, so I must kill him, well said. A slightly strange voice came from the ruins in front of them. If you dare to hurt me, I will kill all your relatives, friends, and teachers. Gunan's figure slowly stood up from the ruins. There was a big hole in his throat. From the perspective of Hu Wei and the others, they could see the blood vessels that were still squirming around the wound and the tissue that was healing quickly. Gunan's strange voice was caused by the self-repair of his vocal cords. What What kind of monster is this? The projection device had already been broken by Gunan. Some of the audience were in a hurry to leave, for fear that they would encounter an unexpected disaster. Some couldn't hold back their curiosity and tried to surround the VIP seats. Gunan touched his itchy throat with his hand, and a grim smile appeared on his face. Since coming to this world, this was the first time he was really injured. Before this, he was either prepared for it, or he caused the injury himself. And in any case, it was far less serious than this time. If it wasn't for the divine skill blunting, it was hard to say whether he could have survived. Gunan, who had brushed shoulders with death several times, didn't say another word. His figure instantly moved, and the blood knife slashed straight at Hu Wei. "Go!" Yi Qinglan shouted and took a step forward. He actually took the initiative to meet him. He waved the sword in his hand lightly. The majestic sword essence was still sharp, as if it hadn't been broken in two, and there was a faint light flashing under his feet, as if something was slowly spreading. This bitter sword saint finally used his core technique, his bitter sword domain. Birth, old age, sickness, and death, all kinds of suffering. Yi Qinglan's eyes were calm, and he said softly, "There are 39,000 sword essences in my domain, and each one is taken from the suffering of a person learning the sword. If you can't understand the bitter sword, you will never be able to leave." Halfway through his sentence, he couldn't continue any further, because as Gunan walked step by step, countless sword essences slashed at his body with each step, but they couldn't stop his footsteps. 39,000 swords, each sword stronger than the one before, and each sword more difficult to comprehend. Yi Qinglan's bitter sword domain was originally the best technique to trap the enemy, but who knew? Gunan actually withstood it. After walking out of the bitter sword domain, Gunan's body was covered in sword wounds. Even his eyebrows had been shaved off. But ever since he walked out of the domain, with every step he took, the wounds on his body healed a little. When he walked in front of Yi Qinglan, some of the sword wounds had even started to scab. "Why aren't you talking?" Gunan smiled at Yi Qinglan. "If you don't want to talk, then go on your way." Bang! He pressed his palm on the top of Yi Qinglan's head and directly pressed the latter's head into his body. Then, he turned to look at Hu Wei. Hu Wei had the appearance of a snow lady, and she used the last of her strength to unleash a psychic storm towards Gunan. But even the defense of the sage robe couldn't be broken. To Gunan, it was like a light breeze. Seeing this, Hu Wei didn't resist. She just smiled coldly at Gunan. "If you want to kill me, just do it. If you want me to beg for mercy, let me tell you can't." Chapter 78. Even at the moment of her death, Hu Wei still had a look of disbelief on her face. Perhaps she still wanted to provoke Gunan and then find a chance to fight back. Unfortunately, she didn't have that chance. Gunan never thought that there was any meaning in torturing someone to death. Since they were going to die anyway, killing their entire family was more effective than torturing them to death. After killing Yi Qinglan and Hu Wei, Gunan turned his attention to Lu Li. This young Master Lu was smart and instantly used 3 substitution techniques to teleport 500 meters away. In an instant, he couldn't even be seen. The corner of Gunan's mouth curled up. He was too lazy to care about him. His current thoughts were on one hand, the series of events, and, on the other hand, how to fulfill his promise. Gunan walked down the VIP seats step by step. He held the blood-stained golden eagle in his hand. His left eye seemed to be even redder, which made him look even more devilish. "I'll go to Lu's family first. If nothing goes wrong, the mastermind behind this should show up soon." Gunan thought for a while and decided on his next move. There was still a group of spectators below the VIP seats. Now that he appeared, there was actually someone who was not afraid of death shouting, "Gunan, you killed Speaker Tion. You'll die a horrible death." There was an obvious accent in the voice, as if it came from a villager. It was probably a loyal supporter of Tian Tianrong. Gunan turned around and saw that the crowd was so dense that he couldn't find the person who spoke. This was the wisdom of ordinary people. After all, the law didn't punish the masses. However, the corner of Gunan's mouth curled up into a cold smile. The shadow under his feet suddenly spread out and turned into a huge palm. It directly fell in that direction. Bang! The palm instantly smashed dozens of people into meat paste. The person who spoke was mistaken about one thing. Gunan didn't need to determine who spoke at all. He could kill them all. When Gunan came to Lu's family again, the evil god temple had already given him a response. Completed mission. Seize Max's eye. Total sin points, 10. Another 10 points were obtained. Gunan's sin points had accumulated to 130 points. The new mission hadn't appeared yet. It would probably only be triggered when Max's eye came in handy. Gunan's footsteps were fast, but the news of the duel spread faster than him. When he arrived at Lu's family, Lu's sinew had already come out to greet him. This gentle woman, who seemed to be able to face anything calmly, had a rare, stiff expression on her face at this moment. After welcoming Gunan in, she barely chatted with him for a while, and then let Gunan enter the inner hall by himself. The two elders are already waiting for you. 2. Gunan raised his eyebrows and smiled. When Gunan walked into the inner hall, he saw two people sitting in front of him. There were 3 cups of tea on the table, and they were still steaming. It was obvious that they had just been poured. Among the 2 people, one was the head of Lu's family, Lu Yiming, who was known as the spiritual elder. The other person was someone who shouldn't be here. Su Yuanjun. Lu Yiming told Lu Li many things, except for one thing. Not only did Su Yuanjun come to 66 Amaterasu, but he hadn't left. So you 2 old men are in cahoots. Gunan smiled and shook his head. He sat opposite them. No wonder you sent me that note. Gunan's body still had a strong smell of blood, but the 2 old men didn't seem to mind. They just smiled and said nothing. After a while, it was Lu Yiming who spoke first. I hope Mr. Gu will be satisfied with this gift. Gunan looked at the 2 of them sitting together and finally understood the ins and outs of the entire matter. He wanted to find the 2 words Max through Lu's family, so Lu Yiming naturally knew about it. And the news about Lin Yunyun was most likely brought by Su Yuanjun. After Red Carp destroyed the 7-star squad, Gunan stayed in Red Carp for a long time. There were many people who studied and investigated him. It wasn't difficult to investigate from Gunan to Lin Yunyun, and then to find out Lin Yunyun's previous hobbies. After all, she had been addicted to stimulants a long time ago, so there were always traces to follow. With the combination of these 2 aspects, and Lu Yiming's experience with the Tian's family, it wasn't strange that he thought of the drug Max. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees more clearly. Mr. Gu is involved, so he can't think of the real Max, Su Yuanjun also said at this time. This time, Gunan nodded slightly, agreeing with the other party's view. He had been thinking from a conventional point of view, but he didn't think that Lin Yunyun was the key to the mission. The specific meaning of Max still fell on her. Therefore, he looked for the names of people and places related to Max, but he still found nothing. On the contrary, these 2 old men only had a few pieces of information at hand, so they could figure it out after a little connection. Gunan looked at Lu Yiming again and said, Old Lu is also a cruel person. A good disciple was sent to my sword just like that? Since the people who set up the plot were these 2 old men, they were naturally the ones who caused the 2 sides to fight. Lu Yiming shook his head helplessly and said very frankly, I've already set up the stage for her. In the end, her skills are not as good as others, so there's nothing that the old man can do. Gunan looked at the 2 of them with a little amusement. These 2 old men had completely different personalities. Su Yuanjun was worthy of the 4 words scheming and far-sighted, while Lu Yiming, who had the title of Old Man of the Heart, was supposed to be shrewd and sophisticated, but instead, he was like an old child. However, no matter how old a child he was, he didn't miss out on the things that needed to be calculated. The 2 of them spent a lot of effort to set up such a plot, so that no matter which side won this matter, they would still be helping. Now that it was Gunan who killed Hu Wei and Lu Yiming, even though the matter was provoked by the 2 old men, they did indeed deliver what he wanted to him. So of course they were helping. Even the idea of a duel was proposed by someone from the Tian's family, and had nothing to do with these 2 old men. On the other hand, if Gunan died at the hands of Hu Wei, then the 2 old men would naturally help to restrict Gunan and make him agree to the duel, which would naturally be a great help. In short, no matter what the result was, they would be standing on the side of the winner. There There was always a reason why a 1,000-year-old family could stand tall and not fall. No matter what, I owe you for this matter this time. If there's anything in the future, feel free to ask. Gunan drank the tea in his cup in one gulp and stood up. The two old men hurriedly stood up as well. They had been busy for so long, just waiting for this sentence from Gunan. From their point of view, Gunan was the kind of person who was loyal, capable, and had a big temper. This kind of person usually placed the most importance on promises. Of course, they wouldn't understand that the promises that players made to NPCs were basically like farts. It wasn't a big deal for players to go back on their word after making a promise.